There is a television show that has been on the air since 1989. It has never been canceled. It has never taken a permanent hiatus. It has never been replaced or rebooted or retooled into something unrecognizable. It has simply continued, week after week, season after season, for longer than most of the people currently watching it have been alive. And in all that time, across every episode and every frame, hiding in the background of jokes that were written to make you laugh and move on, the show was doing something else entirely. Something quieter. Something patient. It was building a world so intricate and so strange that most people never noticed the full shape of it because you were always too busy watching the part the show wanted you to watch. Tonight we are going to watch the other parts. We are going to slow down. We are going to let the details breathe. We are going to sit with Springfield the way you sit with a place you have known your whole life but never truly looked at, and we are going to find the version of the show that was always there, underneath the laughter, waiting for someone to pay attention. Get comfortable. Turn the lights down low. Let your mind settle. This is going to take a while, and that is exactly the point. Section 1. The yellow skin. What color does to a world, and what this world's color has always been saying. Every person in Springfield is yellow. Not pale, not olive-toned, not the warm, sun-kissed gold of someone who spends their weekends outside. Yellow. Taxi cab yellow. Legal pad yellow. The yellow of something that has been left out too long or processed in a way that was never meant to happen to living tissue. And nobody in Springfield finds this strange. Homer Simpson is yellow. Marge Simpson is yellow. Their 3 children are yellow. Their neighbors are yellow. The mayor is yellow. The police chief is yellow. The doctor who treats them is yellow. The priest who sermonizes above them every Sunday morning is yellow. The criminals who occasionally menace them and the judges who sentence those criminals and the reporters who cover all of it yellow, yellow, yellow all the way down. When you watch the show as a child, you do not question this. The yellow skin is just how they look. The same way cartoon cats are sometimes pink and cartoon dogs are sometimes purple. And the whole arrangement is filed under, "That is how cartoons work," and stored somewhere in the brain where it will never be examined again. But here is what changes when you watch it as an adult. When you have spent enough time looking at the world to know that yellow is not a color that healthy human skin is supposed to be. When you understand that jaundice is a medical symptom, not an aesthetic choice. When you know that certain kinds of prolonged chemical or radiation exposure can cause changes in pigmentation that manifest as a yellowing of the skin and the whites of the eyes, and you look back at Springfield and you think, they all have it. Every single one of them. All at once. The yellow skin of Springfield was a production decision made in the earliest days of the show's development. Matt Groening has talked about it. The color was chosen because it was unusual enough to register immediately as cartoon character rather than poorly rendered human being, and it would hold up across different television sets with different calibrations. That is the official story. The practical explanation. The one that lives at the surface level of the show's history and answers the question without going any deeper. But the show itself, across 36 years of episodes, has never let that explanation be the final word. Think about the structure of the show's visual world for a moment. Springfield has yellow residents. Everyone accepts this as normal. But when someone arrives from outside Springfield, a celebrity guest, a character from another city, a visiting dignitary, an FBI agent, a government inspector, they look different. Their proportions shift slightly. Their coloring is different. Their eyes sit in their faces at different angles. The show draws outsiders with more naturalistic features than it draws Springfield residents. It has done this consistently. Not every time, not in every episode, but as a recurring visual pattern across the entire run of the series. People who live inside the town look a certain way. People who come from outside look another way. And the people from outside, the ones who look more like people you might actually encounter in the world, are treated by the show as visitors, as temporary presences, as beings from a different category of reality than the permanent residents. Yellow is Springfield's baseline. It is the color of belonging there. Now here is where the texture of this detail becomes interesting. The show has on multiple occasions placed yellow-skinned Springfield residents in situations where their coloring should have been commented on, should have raised flags, should have prompted at least one external observer to say something. A doctor from out of town examining Homer, looking at his charts, looking at his skin, and saying nothing. A federal official walking through the town and encountering residents with this unusual pigmentation without registering any surprise. Scientists conducting environmental studies in Springfield without noting the visible physical abnormality present in every person they meet. The absence of reaction is its own kind of story. The show is not just showing you yellow skin. It is showing you a world in which yellow skin is so normalized within its own geography that even people who should notice it, people whose professional training specifically equips them to notice unusual physical presentations, simply do not. That is a specific choice. That is not lazy writing. That is the show constructing a world in which the abnormal has been so thoroughly absorbed into the fabric of everyday life that it has become invisible, even to those who should be able to see it clearly. There is a moment in Season 8 that stays with you once you have noticed it. A scene in which a group of Springfield elementary children are photographed together for a class picture, and the photograph, when it is developed, shows 30 yellow faces arranged in rows, with the cheerful placidity of people who have never questioned what they look like. The photographer takes the picture. The picture comes back. Everyone smiles at it. Nobody sees anything unusual. The show is doing something very deliberate with that image. It is showing you normalization in real time. It is showing you a population that has been so thoroughly acclimated to its own condition that the condition itself has ceased to register as a condition. This connects to something the show establishes quietly across dozens of episodes. Springfield does not have a healthy relationship with medical attention. Homer avoids doctors. Marge tends to manage family health crises at home rather than seeking professional consultation. When Springfield residents do go to the doctor, the consultations are frequently played as absurdist comedy, as scenes in which the medical establishment of the town is revealed to be as compromised, as incurious, and as fundamentally indifferent to the actual health of its patients as every other institution in Springfield. Dr. Hibbert, the Simpson family's primary physician, is a warm and affable presence. He laughs easily. He is professionally confident. He is beloved by the community, and across 3 decades of treating the Simpson family, he has never once commented on the physical characteristics shared by every member of his patient population. He has never ordered a skin biopsy. He has never conducted an environmental health study. He has never connected the physical presentation of his patients to the industrial facility 2 miles from where most of them live. Dr. Hibbert knows what healthy human skin looks like. He went to medical school. He has been practicing for decades. The color of his patient's skin is not standard, and he treats it as though it is. There are several ways to read this. The most charitable reading is that Dr. Hibbert is simply a product of his environment the same way everyone else in Springfield is, that he grew up seeing yellow skin and it became his normal, that the color is as unremarkable to him as the color of grass or the color of a cloudy sky. This reading makes him sympathetic but not particularly useful as a medical professional. The less charitable reading is that Dr. Hibbert, like every other professional in Springfield who has ever had the tools to investigate what is actually happening to the people of this town, has chosen not to look too closely. That there is a quiet, unspoken institutional understanding in Springfield that certain questions are not asked, that certain observations are not recorded, that the town's collective health is not a subject that benefits anyone in a position of power to investigate with any rigor, and the yellow skin sits at the center of that understanding. It is the most visible, most constant, most universally shared physical characteristic of Springfield's entire population. It is the thing you would notice first if you arrived in this town having never been there before. It is the thing that would make you stop and say something. The fact that nobody ever does say something is the show's quietest running mystery. It has been running since the very first frame of the very first episode, and it has never been resolved. Because the show does not want to resolve it. The show wants you to have absorbed it, to have made it comfortable, to have let it become your normal the same way it became Springfield's normal. That is the trick. That is what the yellow skin actually does to you as a viewer. After a few seasons, after a few hundred episodes, you stop seeing it. You stop registering it as unusual. You sit down and watch a family of jaundiced cartoon people do funny things, and the color stops being strange and starts being warm and familiar and home. And that is exactly how Springfield works. That is exactly how the town has survived this long, without anyone holding up a photograph of its residents and asking the simplest question in the world: Why does everyone look like that? The yellow skin is not the answer to that question. The yellow skin is the question. It has always been the question. Every episode in every frame, hiding in plain sight. Now, let us talk about something that most people experience in Springfield, but almost nobody consciously processes: the sound. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. And if you want more of this kind of deep, slow breakdown, subscribe. It means more than you know. Section 2. The sound design. How Springfield's audio architecture tells stories that the visuals never acknowledge. There is a version of The Simpsons that most people have never consciously heard, not because it is hidden or obscure, because hearing it requires a specific kind of attention that the show does not encourage and that most viewing conditions do not support. It requires you to stop watching for a moment and simply listen, to close your eyes, or at least stop tracking the visual comedy, and let the sounds of Springfield fill the space around you without the distraction of the images they are attached to. When you do that, something opens up. The Simpsons has, since its earliest seasons, maintained one of the most carefully constructed audio environments in the history of American television. The sound design of the show operates on multiple layers simultaneously, and most of those layers are never meant to be consciously noticed. They are meant to be felt. They are meant to do their work below the threshold of active perception, shaping your emotional response to what you are seeing without your awareness that this is happening. Let us start with the most familiar sound in the show's entire audio vocabulary: the sound of the television inside the Simpsons' living room. In hundreds of episodes spanning every season of the show, the Simpson family sits in front of their television and watches something. The television in their living room is, in many ways, the show's central architectural element. It is where the family gathers. It is the object that organizes the room, that the couch faces, that everyone orients their body toward when they enter the space. The Simpsons is a show about a family watching television, and the television they watch is almost always on, almost always making noise, almost always generating some kind of audio presence in the background of whatever scene is being staged in the living room. And here is the detail that rewards attention. The sounds coming from the Simpsons television are not random. They are not generic television noise dropped in to fill the audio environment. They are specific. They reference specific programs, specific genres, specific cultural moments. And they change across the seasons in ways that mirror the broader cultural landscape of the era in which each episode was produced. In the early seasons, the television sounds coming from the Simpsons' living room are grounded in the media environment of the late 1980s and early 1990s, game show audio, news broadcast formality, the specific compressed warmth of sitcom laugh tracks from a particular era. If you have any memory of sitting in a living room in that period with a television on, the sounds from the Simpsons TV will feel uncannily familiar. They are not mimicking specific real programs. They are synthesizing the audio texture of an entire era's worth of television, distilling it into a background hum that functions as ambient timekeeping. As the show moves into the middle seasons, the television sounds become more fragmented, more genre promiscuous, more willing to jump between registers in ways that mirror the fragmenting of the television landscape itself. Cable television was expanding. The monoculture of the three-network era was beginning to dissolve, and the audio bleeding from the Simpsons TV begins to reflect this. More chaos, more tonal dissonance, more sounds that do not quite resolve into recognizable genre signatures. This is not something the show ever calls attention to. There is no episode where a character says, "The television sounds different now." The shift happens gradually, season by season, almost imperceptibly, the way real cultural change always happens. You do not notice it happening. You only notice it has happened when you compare early episodes to late ones and feel the difference without being able to name it. But there is a second layer to the show's audio architecture that is stranger and more interesting than the television sounds, and it lives in the exterior of Springfield. Go back to any episode set partially outdoors. Any scene on a residential street in Springfield, any scene in the Simpson family's backyard, any establishing shot of the neighborhood before the action of the episode proper begins. Listen to what you hear. Dogs barking in the distance, children playing somewhere off-screen, wind through trees, the occasional car passing, birdsong on the warmer days. The low, persistent hum of what might be machinery, or might be traffic, or might be something else entirely, a sound that is present in enough Springfield exterior scenes to constitute a consistent element of the show's outdoor audio environment. That hum. Once you have heard it, you cannot stop hearing it. It is present in the background of exterior Springfield scenes throughout the show's run. It is never foregrounded, never called attention to, never sourced on screen. It is simply there, underneath everything. A constant low-frequency presence that the show treats as ambient environmental sound, just part of what Springfield sounds like from the outside. The power plant has cooling towers. Cooling towers make noise. Industrial facilities of the type represented by the Springfield nuclear power plant generate a specific kind of low-frequency ambient sound that carries across considerable distances. The kind of sound that residents who live near real industrial facilities describe as just there, as something you stop consciously hearing after a while because your brain categorizes it as constant and therefore unimportant. The show has never explicitly confirmed that the low hum in its exterior audio is meant to represent the power plant. It has never drawn a line between that sound and the facility at the edge of town. But it has been there since the beginning, consistent across decades of episodes, part of Springfield's audio identity in the same way the yellow skin is part of its visual identity, normalized, absorbed, invisible through familiarity. There is something genuinely unsettling about listening for it once you know to listen. Sitting in a quiet room, watching an early season episode, the Simpson children playing outside, the neighborhood peaceful and domestic and warm, and underneath all of it, that hum, just there, just always there. Then there is the sound of Homer at work. The Springfield nuclear power plant, as a setting, has its own distinct audio environment. Control rooms in real nuclear facilities are not loud places. They are climate-controlled, carefully managed spaces where the dominant sounds are the soft clicking of instrumentation, the hum of electronics, the muted beeps of monitoring systems. They are, in a somewhat counterintuitive way, very quiet. The show captures this with some fidelity. Homer's workspace is not a noisy place. The sounds in his control room are soft, mechanical, periodic, and Homer sleeps through most of them. But here is the detail. In the episodes where Homer's incompetence creates a genuine crisis at the plant, when something in the control room begins to malfunction, the audio environment changes. Warning tones activate, indicator sounds multiply. The audio density increases in a way that mirrors the rising tension on screen, but it also mirrors something else. It mirrors what you would actually hear in a nuclear facility when systems begin to fail. The show clearly did research into the audio texture of nuclear operations. The warning sounds in Homer's control room are not generic alarm clock beeps. They have a specificity to them, a technical flavor that suggests the sound designers were working from real reference material. And this creates a strange effect. In the middle of a comedy about Homer's workplace incompetence, the audio environment of the nuclear crisis is genuinely credible. It sounds like a real thing that could actually happen. Which means that in the episodes where Homer causes a nuclear incident, and there are more of these than any comfort-seeking brain wants to enumerate, the comedy is being undercut at the audio level by a kind of sonic realism that keeps threatening to make the scene feel serious. The show walks this line with remarkable precision. The visuals are comedic, the audio is almost documentary, and the tension between those two registers is what gives those scenes their peculiar texture. Funny, yes, but with something underneath the funny that does not go away when the joke lands. Something that stays. The music is its own category entirely, and we will spend a full section on Alf Clausen's extraordinary work later in this video. But there is one musical element worth addressing here, in the context of sound design rather than composition, because it operates as a design choice as much as a musical one. The show uses silence. American television in the 1990s and early 2000s was not comfortable with silence. The industry convention was to maintain near-constant audio density, to fill every pause with underscore or ambient bed or some layer of sonic presence that prevented the viewer from feeling the absence of sound. Silence on television was associated with technical failure, with something going wrong, with a break in the flow that needed to be corrected. The Simpsons violated this convention regularly and deliberately. There are moments in the show's classic seasons, moments in the middle of episodes, moments that are not marked as special or significant by any visual cue, where the audio simply stops. where the comedy and the music and the ambient hum all fall away at once and you are left with nothing. These moments are brief. A beat, maybe two. And then the sound comes back and the episode continues. But in those brief silences, something very specific happens in a viewer's body. The absence of sound, especially sudden absence after a period of audio density, triggers a small alarm in the nervous system. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet signal that something has changed, that attention should be paid. The show uses these silences to mark moments that it wants you to carry. An emotional beat between Homer and Marge. A piece of information delivered in a way that requires space to land. A visual gag that works better against silence than against any music the show could provide. But sometimes the silence falls in moments that are not marked as emotional or comedic. Sometimes it falls in the middle of an establishing shot of Springfield itself, a wide view of the town, the cooling towers visible in the background, the sun moving across the sky, and there is simply nothing to hear. Those silences are the most interesting ones, because they are not filling a narrative function. They are not marking a moment or landing a joke or giving an emotion room to breathe. They are just quiet. They are Springfield, briefly, without the layer of sound design that normally tells you how to feel about what you are seeing. And in that quiet, the town looks different. It looks stiller. It looks more like a place than like a set. It looks like somewhere that has been there for a long time and will be there for a long time after you are done watching. The yellow skin is what Springfield looks like. The hum is what Springfield sounds like when nobody is telling a joke. Section 3. The couch gags as a hidden timeline. 36 years of opening sequences, and the story they tell about a show watching itself change. Every episode of The Simpsons begins the same way. Bart writes something on a chalkboard. The family races home. They pile onto the couch. Something happens with the couch. The family reacts. The episode begins. If you are a regular viewer of the show, this sequence has been absorbed so deeply into your unconscious that you process it without really watching it. It is an opening ritual, a set of familiar movements that your brain treats as the show's equivalent of a door opening the signal that what you came for is about to begin. You have seen some version of this sequence hundreds of times. Your brain has classified it as background and moved on. But the couch gag, that final, variable element of the opening sequence, the part that changes every single episode, has been doing something for 36 years that most people have never fully appreciated. It has been keeping a diary. The couch gags in The Simpsons' earliest seasons are simple. The family arrives, sits on the couch, something minor and absurd happens. An extra person is there. They fall off the couch. The couch bounces them to the ceiling. These are 1-0-second visual jokes, low concept, designed to deliver a quick laugh before the episode proper begins. They are the work of a show finding its footing, establishing a tradition without fully understanding what the tradition will eventually become. By the middle seasons, roughly seasons 6 through 12, the period most fans identify as the show's creative peak, the couch gags have grown more elaborate. They take longer. They require more setup. They deploy visual concepts that are genuinely inventive and occasionally surreal, things that could not happen in the episode proper because the episode proper has a narrative to maintain. The couch gag has become the show's designated space for experiments, for things the writers want to try that do not fit anywhere else. A couch gag from this period might reference a specific work of art, or parody a film from the same year, or execute a visual joke so complex that it requires a full 30 seconds to pay off. These are not throwaway moments. These are carefully crafted pieces of animation that required real time and real creative investment, delivered in the opening credits of an episode that most viewers were watching while eating dinner or settling into their couch at home on a Sunday evening. The elaboration of the couch gag across this period is a direct record of the show's growing confidence. It is the show saying, we can afford to spend 30 seconds on a joke that serves no narrative purpose. We can afford to give you something purely for the pleasure of it. We have earned enough goodwill, we have banked enough trust with our audience, that we can take the time to do something beautiful and strange in the 20 seconds before the episode begins. That confidence reads differently in retrospect, because it was also the confidence of a show that was about to change. The later seasons bring a different kind of couch gag. Starting roughly around season 14 and accelerating through the subsequent years, the couch gags begin to incorporate elements that the earlier seasons never would have touched. Celebrity animators are brought in to contribute their own versions of the sequence. Elaborate, high-concept parodies of other films and television shows appear. The sequences grow longer, sometimes extending to 2 or 3 minutes, consuming a significant portion of the episode's running time. And here is the detail that rewards attention when you watch the couch gags as a sequential archive rather than as individual jokes. The increasingly elaborate, increasingly self-referential nature of the later couch gags is the signature of a show that has become aware of itself as a cultural monument. The early couch gags are a show making a joke. The later couch gags are a show making a statement about being a show. They are the opening credits of something that knows it is famous, that knows it is being studied, that knows generations of people have sat down to watch it and will continue to sit down to watch it long after the people who made it are gone. There is a particular cluster of couch gags from the late seasons in which the show makes explicit reference to its own history. Sequences where the couch is surrounded by artifacts from previous seasons, where earlier versions of the characters appear alongside their current selves, where the timeline of the show is briefly visible as a physical object in the frame. These sequences are strange and affecting in a way that simple parody couch gags are not. They are the show looking in the mirror. They are 36 years of a single family arriving at the same couch, in the same house, in the same town, and the sequence has become aware of what it means that they keep arriving. The most famous single couch gag in the show's history is probably the one directed by Banksy, the street artist, which aired in season 22. The sequence begins with the normal Springfield imagery and then moves into something darker, a depiction of overseas animation production conditions, of factory settings, of the industrial machinery behind the cheerful product. It is a couch gag that accuses the show of something. It is the opening credits of a show calling out the conditions under which it is produced. The Simpsons allowed this to air. The network allowed this to air. The sequence was not pulled or softened. It ran as part of a regular episode, sandwiched between a chalkboard joke and the episode's first act. And then the episode began and Springfield went on being Springfield, and no one in the show's universe acknowledged that anything unusual had just happened. That is the structure of the couch gag's function in the larger architecture of the show. It happens in a different register than the episode itself. It operates outside the show's diegetic reality. The characters do not remember the couch gag once the episode begins. The couch gag is something that happens to them without their awareness, a framing device they are inside of but not conscious of, which creates this peculiar situation. The couch gags are, in a very specific sense, the most honest part of the show. They are the part that exists outside the story. They are the part that can show you the machinery, can make the meta-reference, can acknowledge what the show is and what it costs and what it means, precisely because they are not part of the story. They are the frame around the painting. And the frame has been changing this whole time. Slowly, season by season, couch gag by couch gag, from the simple physical jokes of the early seasons to the elaborate cultural statements of the later ones, the frame has been telling a story that the painting inside it never could. It is the story of a show watching itself age. The characters cannot age. We have established that. The floating timeline prevents it. Bart will always be 10, Lisa will always be 8. Homer and Marge will always be in their mid-30s. The story inside the frame is frozen, but the frame keeps changing. The couch gags keep becoming more elaborate, more self-aware, more conscious of their own history. The opening sequence keeps getting older even as the characters in it stay the same age. And if you watch the couch gags in sequence, from the first season through the most recent, you see not the frozen present of Springfield's inhabitants, but the real passage of time, the genuine aging of the show itself, expressed in the only place the show is allowed to be honest about it. The couch gag is where The Simpsons keeps its clock. This connects to something smaller and more domestic: the chalkboard. Bart's punishment lines at the beginning of each episode follow a similar arc. The early chalkboard gags are simple and direct joke lines that a child might actually be forced to write by a frustrated teacher. They are plausible in the context of an actual elementary school disciplinary scenario. As the seasons progress, the chalkboard lines become increasingly absurd, increasingly self-referential, increasingly impossible as actual school punishments. By the later seasons, some chalkboard lines are clearly written for an adult audience. Their humor depends on cultural knowledge that Bart, as a 10-year-old in 1989 or 2025, would not possess. The chalkboard has aged too, even though Bart has not. This is the show leaving fingerprints. This is the production history of 36 years pressing through the fictional surface of a cartoon and leaving marks that do not belong to any character but only to time itself. Every time the couch gag changes, every time the chalkboard line shifts register, every time the opening sequence does something that the opening sequence of a few seasons ago would never have done, the show is acknowledging something it cannot acknowledge directly, something that lives in the structure rather than the story. The Simpson family will never grow up, but the show around them has been aging since the very first frame. Section 4. The background characters. Springfield's silent population and what they have been recording this whole time. Most television shows have background characters. They exist to populate spaces, to make restaurants look like restaurants and streets look like streets, and schools look like schools. They walk through the shot. They sit at other tables. They stand in lines. They are furniture with faces. Springfield's background characters are different. The Simpsons has maintained a consistent cast of background characters across its entire run that is, by any reasonable measure, the most elaborate and most persistently developed secondary population in the history of American animation. These characters have names. They have recognizable faces and recognizable voices, and in many cases they have been given, across multiple episodes spanning multiple seasons, something approaching a biographical history. They are not furniture. They are witnesses. Consider the sheer number of Springfield residents who have appeared with enough consistency to be named, to be remembered, to be recognized by a loyal viewer without any introduction or caption. The comic book store owner with his dismissive authority over popular culture, the school groundskeeper with his Scots vowels and his decades of outdoor labor leaving him weathered and aggrieved, the tavern owner who has loved and lost and continues to pour beer for people who are slightly less lonely in his presence. The elderly couple who have been married so long that their communication has evolved past language into a series of gestures and silences that convey everything necessary. These are not protagonists. They are never the center of the story. They exist in the orbits of the main characters, close enough to be visible, far enough to never fully resolve. But across 36 seasons, across nearly 800 episodes, the cumulative weight of their presence adds up to something. The background of Springfield is not empty. It has been populated with increasing density and specificity by people who have lives that extend beyond any single episode, who have histories that the show has gradually disclosed through brief exchanges and fleeting background moments and occasional spotlight episodes that illuminate some corner of their existence before returning them to the periphery. The question worth asking is, what does it mean to be a background character in Springfield? What is the experience of being a person who exists fully, who has a name and a history and a face and a set of recurring anxieties, but who is never the protagonist, who is always visible but rarely central? There is a category of background character in Springfield that the show handles with particular care, and it is the category of the permanently suffering. Characters who appear repeatedly, not to advance a story, but to absorb a consequence. To be in the wrong place when something goes wrong, to stand at the edge of the disaster and sustain the impact. Hans Moleman is the most extreme version of this, and we will return to him in a dedicated section later in this video. But he is not alone. Springfield has a population of characters who seem to exist at the intersection of the town's misfortunes, who accumulate injury with a patience and a resignation that, if you watch carefully enough, starts to look less like comedy and more like something much quieter and more unsettling. These are people who have been broken by Springfield the way Springfield breaks things gradually, persistently, without any single catastrophic event that would justify the cumulative damage. They are worn down rather than struck. They carry the weight of a town that does not notice them carrying it. The show has given these characters enough detail to make them legible as people rather than props, but never enough detail to make their suffering narratively meaningful in the way that the Simpson family's suffering is narratively meaningful. Homer suffers, and we know why. We have been given the architecture of his damage. The background characters suffer, and the architecture is implied rather than stated, but it is there. In the recurring appearances, in the way the same faces appear at the margins of the same disasters, in the body language of characters who have been standing in the background of Springfield for 36 years and have had time, in that standing, to develop the posture of people who have been absorbing the ambient conditions of this town for a very long time. The background characters of Springfield are the show's environmental monitoring system. They are the canaries. And the information they are providing, if you read it as a cumulative data set rather than as a series of disconnected jokes, tells you something specific about the toll of living in this particular place. Look at the way Springfield's background population ages in comparison to its main characters. The main characters do not age. We have established this. The floating timeline keeps them frozen. But the background characters, and this is a detail that rewards patient, season-by-season attention, the background characters show more visible wear as the series progresses. Not aging in the conventional sense, not growing older in any linear, realistic way, but accumulating over the seasons a kind of visual tiredness that was not there in the early episodes. The faces that were merely eccentric in Season 2 are more deeply lined by Season 15. The postures that were merely crooked have developed a more pronounced forward lean. The energies that were merely odd have settled into something more resigned. The background of Springfield, watched across decades of episodes, develops a quality that is difficult to name precisely but easy to recognize. The quality of people who have been somewhere for a very long time and have stopped expecting things to be different. The main characters are frozen in optimism, or at least in the perpetual possibility of optimism. Homer can always believe that this plan will work. Bart can always believe that this prank will land. Lisa can always believe that this injustice will be corrected. The Simpson family, by virtue of their frozen age, retains the cognitive and emotional posture of people for whom the future is still a place where things might improve. The background characters have been in Springfield longer, in a subjective sense. They carry the town's history in their posture. And what they carry looks, in the later seasons, like the physical evidence of having lived under the conditions that Springfield provides, without any of the narrative protection that the main characters enjoy. The main characters are immune. The background characters are not. This is one of the show's most carefully maintained visual arguments, distributed across hundreds of background frames in hundreds of episodes, never stated directly, never called to the audience's attention. The background of Springfield is the show's long-term data set on what this town does to the people who live in it without protective narrative status, and the data has been accumulating for 36 years. There is one more thing worth noting about Springfield's background population, and it is the detail that most rewards a kind of sustained, meditative viewing, a slow-watching approach where you let your eyes drift from the main action to the edges of the frame. The background characters are watching too, in scene after scene, in episode after episode. While the main characters drive the story forward and the jokes land and the narrative develops, the faces in the background are turned toward the action. They are observing. They are registering. They are witnesses to things that the show's official narrative never acknowledges as significant. When Homer does something catastrophic in a public space, the background characters see it. Their expressions reflect it. And then, in the next shot, they are looking away, or they have been replaced by a different crowd, or the show has moved on and their witnessing has been left behind, unrecorded. They know what happened. They were there. They saw it. Springfield's background population has seen everything that the town has ever tried to forget. They were in the crowd when the sun was blocked. They were in the audience at the town meeting. They were standing on the street when the dome went up. Every collective amnesia event, every community-wide forgetting, every reset, the background characters were present for all of it. They are Springfield's institutional memory, and they say nothing about it, because that is what it means to be a background character in Springfield, to have seen everything, to remember everything, to carry it in your posture and your expression and the particular quality of your silence, and to never, ever say a word. Section 5. Maggie's eyes. The visual language of the show's most watchful character and what she has been seeing. There are eyes in The Simpsons that do not belong to their owner's apparent mental life. Homer's eyes are expressive in the way that all great cartoon characters' eyes are expressive. They communicate emotion directly, broadly, without subtlety, because subtlety is not what Homer requires. When Homer is confused, his eyes convey confusion in a way that could be read from across a crowded room. When Homer is delighted, his eyes are the first thing to communicate the delight, before his mouth moves, before his body responds. Homer's eyes are his most visible emotional organ. Marge's eyes are different. Marge's eyes are patient and watchful and occasionally afraid in ways that her other features do not communicate, that her posture does not communicate. that her voice, calm and reasonable and steadying, actively works to conceal. If you watch Marge's eyes rather than listening to her voice, you sometimes catch something that the voice is working hard to cover: a fear, a doubt, a private calculation about whether this particular Homer crisis is manageable or whether this is the one that breaks something unfixable. Bart's eyes are performing. This is not a criticism. Bart's visual identity is built around performance, around the presentation of a self that is constructed for audience rather than for private truth. His eyes are always slightly engaged with their external audience in a way that Homer's and Marge's are not. Even in moments of genuine emotion, Bart's eyes maintain a peripheral awareness of how he looks to someone watching. Lisa's eyes are the eyes of someone trying not to cry. This is a generalization, but it holds across enough episodes to constitute a visual signature. Lisa processes the world with an intensity that her face frequently struggles to contain, and the eyes are where the struggle is most visible. The emotion is real. The containment is effortful. The gap between the two is where Lisa lives. And then there are Maggie's eyes. Maggie's eyes are vast. Proportionally, they take up more of her face than any other character's eyes take up of theirs. This is partly a design choice rooted in the visual conventions of babies and animation. Large eyes signal youth and vulnerability and the kind of cuteness that protects. But Maggie's eyes do something that the eyes of other cartoon babies typically do not do. They are always focused on something. When other characters drift into the background of a scene, their eyes tend to soften, to lose the specificity of their gaze, to become props in the visual composition rather than active perceptual instruments. This is normal. This is how animation works when a character is not the primary focus of a scene. The eyes go soft, the attention diffuses. The character becomes part of the environment. Maggie's eyes do not do this. Watch any scene in which Maggie is present but not the central focus. Watch where her eyes are directed. They are tracking something. They are pointed at something specific, another character, an action happening in the foreground, an exchange between adults who are not aware they are being observed. Maggie's eyes, across 36 seasons of episodes, in background appearances and foreground moments alike, are almost always pointed at something with a specificity and a steadiness that no other character maintains when they are not the scene's primary focus. The animators did not have to do this. The standard approach would have been to soften Maggie's gaze in scenes where she is peripheral, to let her become part of the visual background, the way other background characters do. The choice to maintain the focus of her gaze even when she is not the scene's subject is a deliberate one, repeated across hundreds of episodes, maintained across multiple animation teams and production eras. It means something. The most immediate thing it means is this: Maggie is never not paying attention. In scenes where every other character is occupied with the immediate drama of the episode, Homer's crisis, Bart's scheme, Lisa's campaign, Marge's management of all of the above, Maggie is watching. She is absorbing. She is registering everything that happens in her visual field with the same focused attention, whether the thing happening is important to the episode's story or not. She is the show's most comprehensive witness. This connects to something the show has established in episodes that center on Maggie more directly: her capacity for what can only be described as strategic observation. The Maggie-centric episodes, though relatively rare, consistently establish her as a character who gathers information before acting, who watches a situation until she understands it fully, who does not respond to stimuli immediately but processes them first, sometimes over a period of time that would feel like passivity if you did not know what was being assembled behind those enormous, focused eyes. The 2012 short film devoted to her 7 minutes of Maggie navigating a daycare facility without speaking a word is essentially a document of this observational intelligence in action. Before Maggie does anything in that sequence, she looks. She scans the environment. She maps the space, identifies the players, reads the social dynamics, locates the resources. The action comes later, and it is efficient precisely because the observation was so thorough. But the short film makes explicit what the regular series implies through background detail. Maggie's observation is not passive. It is methodical. It has structure. She is not simply registering sensory input the way a baby registers warmth or light or sound. She is categorizing. She is building a model of the situation that will inform a subsequent decision. This is not infant cognition. This is something else. There is a specific visual grammar the show uses for Maggie that is different from the visual grammar it uses for other characters, and it is most visible in the way the show frames her face when something significant is happening around her. When Homer does something foolish or catastrophic, when Bart executes a prank with unforeseen consequences, when the adults in the room make a decision whose implications they have not fully considered, the show frequently cuts to Maggie's face, not to get her reaction, not because she will say something or do something in response, but simply to place her in the visual record of the moment, to establish she was here, she saw this. The cut to Maggie in these moments functions as a kind of timestamp. It marks the event as witnessed. It places an observer in the scene who will carry the observation forward, into subsequent episodes, into the quiet archive of everything this baby has seen and processed and held without releasing. Maggie's eyes have cataloged every crisis, every comedy, every disaster, every tender moment between the members of this family since the show's first episode. She has been watching Homer Simpson for 36 years. She knows every version of him that the show has produced. She has absorbed the full picture in a way that no other character has, because no other character is always present, always attentive, always holding their gaze steady on the thing in front of them. What she has done with this information is the show's longest-running open question. There is a moment in Season 12 that rewards very careful attention. It is a brief moment, part of a scene that is primarily focused on Homer and Marge, and it lasts perhaps 3 seconds before the show moves on. Maggie, sitting in her usual position, turns to look directly at the camera, not at another character. At the camera. The fourth wall is not broken in any conventional sense. There is no joke attached to this moment. No character acknowledges that Maggie has looked at the camera. The show does not call attention to it. It simply happens, and then it stops happening and the scene continues. But for those 3 seconds, Maggie's enormous focused eyes are pointed directly at you. What she saw when she looked there is not explained. What she was communicating, if anything, is not stated. The moment exists in the show's visual record without annotation, without context, without the show's usual apparatus for telling you how to feel about what you are seeing. It is just Maggie looking at you with eyes that have seen everything, and then looking away. Section 6. The architecture of Springfield. Buildings that cannot exist and what their impossibility reveals about the space they occupy. Springfield has a geography problem. The town's physical layout, across 36 seasons of episodes, is internally inconsistent in ways that go far beyond the normal variability you would expect from a long-running animated series. This is not a matter of minor continuity errors, a building appearing on the wrong side of the street in one episode, or a neighborhood looking slightly different than it did 3 seasons ago. The architectural inconsistency of Springfield is structural and persistent, and in many cases, physically impossible. The Simpson house on Evergreen Terrace is the most famous example. The house has a consistent exterior, a consistent address, and a consistent place in the neighborhood. It is recognizable, it is iconic, but its interior has no stable relationship to its exterior. The number of rooms the house contains varies significantly between episodes. The layout of the ground floor has been depicted in multiple mutually exclusive configurations. The basement appears and disappears depending on narrative necessity. The attic is present in some episodes and absent in others. Rooms that do not appear in the house's standard layout manifest when the story requires them. The house is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, not by a fixed amount, but by whatever amount the current episode needs. This is a common observation about the show, often cited as a continuity error, often dismissed as irrelevant because it is a cartoon, and cartoons do not have to be architecturally consistent. But dismiss it too quickly and you miss what the inconsistency is actually doing. The house responds to narrative necessity. It provides space when space is needed. It conceals space when concealment serves the story. It is, in a very real sense, not a fixed physical object, but a set of narrative possibilities that presents itself as a fixed physical object. The house on Evergreen Terrace is less a building than a container, and the container's capacity is determined not by any architectural logic, but by what the story requires at any given moment. This is true of Springfield as a whole, on a larger scale. The town has a nuclear power plant, a tire fire that has been burning for decades, a harbor, mountains visible from the downtown area, a desert within driving distance, a canyon close enough for casual visits, an aquarium, a monorail system, a professional baseball stadium, a prison, multiple hospitals, a shopping mall, a Chinatown, and what appears to be a small international airport. It has suburbs and a downtown and industrial districts and farmland, all accessible without the kind of travel time that would separate these different urban zones in a real city. The distances between Springfield's landmarks are elastic. Characters drive for what appears to be minutes to reach destinations that, in a geographically consistent world, would require hours. Characters walk to places that should be on the far side of town. The spatial relationships between locations shift between episodes without the show acknowledging that the shift has occurred. There is a convenience to this, obviously. A show about a family in a specific place needs the family to be able to reach any part of their world without the narrative cost of realistic travel time. This is a production solution, but it is also a world-building choice that has a specific effect on how Springfield feels as a place. Springfield feels close. Everything in it feels accessible, present, nearby. The distances between things are emotional rather than geographic. You can get anywhere in Springfield in the amount of time it takes to want to be there. The town contracts and expands according to the needs of the people living in it rather than according to any fixed spatial logic. This is the geography of a dream. In dreams, you can move between places with the logic of desire rather than the logic of distance. You need to be somewhere, and then you are there. The space between where you were and where you needed to be collapses without resistance. The geography is subordinate to the narrative, to what the dreaming mind requires in order to maintain the coherence of the story it is telling itself. Springfield's geography works like this. The space between the Simpson house and the nuclear power plant is whatever it needs to be. The space between the school and the mall is whatever serves the current episode. The town's internal distances are fluid, in the same way that a dreamed landscape's internal distances are fluid. We have already discussed the theory that everything after Season 4 is Homer's coma dream. The architecture of Springfield, considered as a spatial system rather than a visual backdrop, provides one of the most consistent pieces of evidence for this reading. Real places have fixed spatial relationships. Dream places have elastic ones. Springfield's spatial relationships are elastic in precisely the way that would be expected of a place assembled from memory and desire rather than from physical reality. The buildings themselves carry a related kind of strangeness. There are structures in Springfield that have no functional explanation. Buildings that appear in the background of outdoor scenes without ever being identified or entered or referenced in dialogue. Structures whose architectural style is inconsistent with their apparent surroundings. A building that looks like it belongs in a different climate, a different era, a different kind of American town. These buildings are not errors. They are too consistent for that. The same unexplained structures appear in the background of Springfield street scenes across multiple seasons, sometimes in slightly different positions, sometimes in the same position but viewed from a different angle. They are fixtures of the town's visual environment. They belong there, in some functional sense, because they keep appearing there. But the show never tells you what they are. This is a specific choice by the animation team, a choice to populate the visual environment of Springfield with more detail than the narrative can account for. To build a town that is bigger, stranger, more various than the stories that are set in it, to suggest, through background architecture, that Springfield has a life and a history that extends beyond any episode's scope, that the town was here before the show began and contains more than any story has ever needed it to contain. The architecture of Springfield is a document of imagined history. Buildings that suggest industries that the show never depicts. Structures that imply social histories that the show never narrates. An urban texture that carries the residue of a past that was never shown, only implied. This is, in fact, how real cities work. The buildings in real cities carry the history of the people and uses that preceded their current inhabitants. They are documents of the past pressed into physical form. They are the urban equivalent of geological strata, each layer representing a different era, a different set of needs, a different version of the community's aspirations. Springfield's buildings do this. They imply a history. They suggest that the town has been through things that were never depicted in any episode, that the community has evolved and been shaped by forces that predate the Simpson family's arrival in the narrative. And one building in particular sits at the center of all of this. The nuclear power plant is the most architecturally documented building in Springfield. Its exterior has been depicted from dozens of angles across hundreds of episodes. Its interior has been mapped more thoroughly than any other Springfield structure. It has a control room, a break room, a cafeteria, a basement, multiple corridors, a reactor core, an executive suite for Mr. Burns, outdoor cooling towers, and a parking structure. And it does not look like it fits. The power plant's architectural style is inconsistent with the residential and commercial buildings that surround it. Its scale is wrong for the town it serves. It is too large, too industrial, too dominant in the landscape for a nuclear facility serving a town of Springfield's apparent size. The cooling towers are visible from essentially everywhere in Springfield, creating a constant visual reference point that anchors the town's geography even when the geography itself is elastic and inconsistent. The plant is always there. No matter where you are in Springfield, no matter what the episode has done with the town's spatial relationships, the cooling towers are visible on the horizon. They are Springfield's fixed coordinate, the point around which the rest of the town's elastic geography organizes itself. The town does not know where it is, but it knows where the plant is. The plant is the center. The plant has always been the center. Everything in Springfield exists in spatial relationship to the cooling towers, regardless of what the rest of the town's geography is doing. That is not a coincidence. That is the architecture telling you something about the town's organizing principle. Section 7. The Chalkboard. 36 years of sentences Bart was made to write, and what they actually say. Every episode of The Simpsons begins with Bart Simpson at a chalkboard. He is writing a sentence. The same sentence, over and over, filling the board with it in the traditional schoolroom punishment format, the public, repetitive articulation of a wrong committed, made visible in chalk, the wrongdoer required to inscribe his own transgression in a form that can be seen and read by anyone who passes by. The chalkboard gag is one of the show's oldest conventions. It was there in the first episode. It has been there in almost every episode since. It is the opening of the opening, the joke before the theme song, the signal that what you are about to watch begins in a particular place. Bart Simpson in trouble, writing it down. The sentences are different every week. They are specifically, deliberately different, not randomized but written, each one tailored to a current event or a running joke or an idea that someone in the writer's room wanted to express in the format of a Bart Simpson detention sentence. The list of all the chalkboard gags is a document. It is an archive. Read sequentially. It is something like a strange diary of the show's relationship with its own cultural moment across 36 years. Some of the sentences are simple. I will not waste chalk. I am not a 32-year-old woman. I did not see Elvis. These are the ones that land cleanly as comedy, the mismatch between the schoolroom, punishment format, and the specific absurdity of the content doing the work, quickly and moving on. But some of the sentences do something else. Some of them carry weight that the format of a quick visual joke should not be able to carry, and yet does. The school is not a dumping ground for my issues. I am not the reincarnation of anything. I will not mess with the opening credits. These ones sit differently. They acknowledge something: the show's awareness of itself, the character's awareness of his situation, the slight melancholy of a child who has been performing rebellion for 36 years and knows it, on some level, to be performance. The chalkboard is Bart's most consistent location in the show. More consistent than his bedroom, more consistent than the classroom where he allegedly sits every day of a school year that has never ended. The chalkboard is where Bart is always placed in the viewer's first image of him each week. It is his pose, his position. The show's shorthand for his entire character, standing at the board, chalk in hand, writing down a wrong. There is a reading of the chalkboard that is not primarily comedic. If you watch the gag every week for a year or for multiple years, the way many viewers of this show have, the repetition begins to accumulate into something, not a joke, a portrait. The portrait of a child who has been punished, formally and publicly, for the specific crime of being who he is, whose punishment takes the form of requiring him to articulate, in his own hand, the ways in which his behavior does not conform to the expected standard. Week after week, always the same format, always the same position, always the chalk. Bart has internalized this punishment so thoroughly that he performs it before you even meet him, before the theme song, before the story begins. He is already at the board. He is already writing down what he did wrong. He does not need to be told to start. He is already there. already inscribing himself, already in the posture of someone who expects to be in trouble and has decided to make the trouble as interesting as possible since it is going to happen regardless. This is not a defeated posture. This is a strategic one. The sentences Bart writes are funny. The TSF, they are clever. They are often more inventive and more alive than anything happening in a classroom that was designed to contain people like Bart and has never quite managed it. The chalkboard punishment has been turned into a performance. The requirement to confess has been turned into an opportunity to be interesting. Bart has made his own sentencing into part of his act. This is what the show has always celebrated about Bart. In the specific way it celebrates things not by having characters praise him for it, not by having adults recognize the creativity in his defiance, but simply by showing it to you, week after week, and letting you understand for yourself what you are looking at. You are looking at a child who took the mechanism of his punishment and made it his, who found the margin of creative freedom inside a structure designed to leave no margin, who writes beautiful, strange sentences in chalk, and then goes inside and starts the episode. The sentences don't last. Chalk wipes away. Whatever Bart wrote last week is gone this week, the board fresh and waiting. He will write something new. He will be punished again. The episode will begin again, and he will be at the board, because he is always at the board. That is where the show puts him. That is where he lives, in the show's visual imagination, in the 1-second image that precedes everything else the child at the chalkboard. Chalk in hand, writing something that will be erased, that will be written again, that has been written and erased and written again for 36 years. The chalkboard is Bart's version of Springfield's loop, his personal version of the reset, his weekly moment of being defined by the institution that has decided who he is and required him to write it down, and his weekly moment of making that definition, briefly, into something worth reading. There is a chalkboard gag from the later seasons that hits differently if you are the right age. It reads, "I will not do the same thing for 30 years and expect different results." Bart wrote that. Or the writers did. Or both. The distinction has never mattered less. Section 8. The school that never taught anyone anything? What Springfield Elementary does when nobody is looking. Springfield Elementary School has been educating children for 36 years without educating any of them. Bart is still in the 4th grade. He was in the 4th grade in 1989. He is in the 4th grade now. He will be in the 4th grade when the show ends, if the show ends, which it shows no particular sign of doing. 36 years of 4th grade. 36 years of the same teachers, the same hallways, the same lunchroom, the same playground, the same social hierarchies that have calcified into permanent fact. 36 years of a child sitting in a classroom that has failed to teach him and has not been particularly troubled by this failure. Springfield Elementary is not a bad school in the way that underfunded urban schools are bad schools in realistic dramas. It is bad in a specifically Springfield way, in the way that all of Springfield's institutions are compromised, which is not through malice or systemic neglect or insufficient resources alone, but through a combination of all of these things plus the specific social contract that Springfield maintains with itself, which is that the appearance of function matters more than actual function. Principal Skinner, who is, as we established earlier, not actually Principal Skinner, runs the school with the manner of a man who spent his formative years in an environment organized around strict hierarchies of authority and has never fully recovered. His relationship with authority is both his greatest devotion and his deepest wound. He believes in the institution. He believes in the school. He believes, with a sincerity that is both touching and slightly unhinged, that Springfield Elementary is doing something important, and that his role in it matters. This belief is maintained through a willful blindness to the evidence, which is extensive, that the school is not doing what it is supposed to do. Mrs. Krabapel Edna, who was loved and lost and who the show honored when it retired her, was a teacher who had given up. Not completely, not permanently. There were episodes that showed you the Edna who had once believed in teaching, who had once entered the classroom with the energy of someone who thought she could make a difference in children's lives, and who had been worn down over years by a combination of institutional dysfunction, unruly students, administrative incompetence, and the specific grinding exhaustion of doing difficult work for inadequate compensation in a system that does not value what you do. Edna's cynicism about Bart was real, but it was not the whole story of her relationship with him. The show gave them moments episodic, not building into anything permanent, but present where the teacher and the student recognized something in each other that the regular dynamic of their relationship did not allow. Where Edna saw the intelligence in Bart that the gradebook could not capture. Where Bart saw the person inside the tired teacher. These moments did not change anything. The next episode, they were back in position, Bart misbehaving and Edna responding with the weary professionalism of someone who has run out of expectations. But the moments happened. The show recorded them. The school's relationship with Lisa is the show's most sustained exploration of what happens when an institution encounters a student it was not designed for. Lisa exceeds every metric the school can measure. She is off the scale academically, artistically, intellectually. She is the model student by every standard the school claims to value, and yet the school does not know what to do with her. It cannot accommodate her. The curriculum is designed for the average, and Lisa is not average. And the teachers who recognize this face a structural problem that cannot be solved within the structure. The structure requires that all students be moved through the same material at the same pace, and Lisa moves through it without effort and then sits, waiting, in a classroom that cannot move faster for her without abandoning the students behind her. This is not a Springfield-specific problem. This is a real structural problem in mass education that the show has dramatized with unusual precision across multiple episodes. The gifted child in the normal classroom, the child whose gifts are recognized but cannot be accommodated, the child who is praised for her abilities and simultaneously failed by the system that is praising her, because praise is not a curriculum and recognition is not challenge, and a student who is not being challenged is not being educated, regardless of how frequently she is told she is brilliant. Springfield Elementary knows Lisa is brilliant. It has never successfully educated her. That is the school's failure. It is a quiet failure, almost invisible, because Lisa continues to be brilliant regardless of whether the school is educating her. She educates herself. She finds books and ideas and challenges outside the classroom. She is the kind of learner who does not require a functional institution because she has internalized the practice of learning so thoroughly that no external structure is necessary. But the school takes credit for her anyway. The school points to Lisa as its success story while providing her with almost nothing. This is also not a Springfield-specific phenomenon. The show knows this. It renders it with enough specificity to be about Springfield and enough generality to be about anywhere. The school cafeteria deserves its own paragraph because the school cafeteria is a microcosm of Springfield's relationship with its children, which is, we will provide you with what is required by law at the lowest possible cost, and we will call it adequate because the minimum is a number and we have met the number. The food in the Springfield Elementary cafeteria is consistently, specifically terrible in ways the show renders with affectionate horror. Mystery meat, gray vegetables, desserts of uncertain provenance. The cafeteria lady Doris, who also had a name, who also existed as a specific person within the school's ecosystem, presiding over it all, with the efficiency of someone who made peace with the quality long ago and now simply executes the service without emotional investment. The children eat this food because it is the food they are given. They make do. They trade items. They complain in the way children complain about institutional food, which is a kind of complaining that does not expect to produce change, that is performed primarily as a social ritual of shared suffering. The food is bad. Everyone knows the food is bad. Nothing changes. The school is the town in miniature. The same institutional dysfunction. The same gap between official purpose and actual function. The same collection of people who are doing their jobs imperfectly within a system that was not designed to work well and has not been changed, because changing it would require someone in a position of power to acknowledge that it does not work. Skinner does not acknowledge this. The school board does not acknowledge this. Springfield does not acknowledge this. The children are educated or not educated, and they grow up or do not grow up, and Springfield goes on. And next Monday morning, Bart is at the chalkboard, writing it down. Section 9. The television inside the television. What the Simpsons watch and what watching it does to them. The Simpsons watch television. This fact is so obvious that it barely seems worth saying, and yet it is one of the most carefully constructed elements of the show's design. The Simpsons are a family that watches a lot of television. They watch television together on the couch, which is the primary location of family togetherness in the show's visual grammar. They watch television separately, in different rooms, for different reasons, with different levels of attention. The television is on in the background of scenes that are not about watching television. It is a presence in the household the way furniture is a presence constant, ambient, not always noticed, but always there. And what they watch is the show's commentary on itself. The Itchy and Scratchy Show, the violent cartoon within the cartoon that Bart and Lisa watch with the rapt attention of children consuming content that was made specifically to produce maximum stimulation in minimum time, is the show's most explicit piece of self-analysis. Itchy and Scratchy is what a cynical producer would make if they started with The Simpsons and removed everything except the elements most likely to hold attention in the short term. Conflict, surprise, sensory impact. The violence is cartoonishly extreme. The relationship between the characters is purely predatory. There is no warmth, no character development, no narrative arc longer than 30 seconds. There is only the next thing happening, the next escalation, the next consequence that is immediately erased so the next thing can happen. Bart and Lisa love Itchy and Scratchy. They love it with the specific, consuming love of children who have been given something that speaks directly to the part of their nervous system designed to respond to novelty and stimulation. They laugh at it. They quote it. They organize their afternoon around it. The show watches them watching it with an awareness that never becomes preachy. It does not tell you that Itchy and Scratchy is bad. It does not have Marge deliver a speech about media violence. It has Marge do that a couple of times, actually, and those episodes examine the question with more genuine complexity than the single-message morality tale format would suggest, arriving at conclusions that are uncomfortable rather than comforting. The show does not know if watching violent cartoons harms children. It knows that children watch them, that the watching is absorbing and pleasurable and disconnected from their real behavior, and that the adults around them are not sure what to do with this knowledge. The show's awareness of itself as television, as a thing that is watched by people who are also watching other things, who live in a culture saturated by television, who have their emotional lives and their worldviews and their sense of what is normal, shaped by what they watch. This awareness runs through the entire series and is one of its most intellectually interesting qualities. The Simpson family is a television family in a way that is different from most television families. Most television families live in a world where television is a background detail, occasionally relevant to the plot but not structurally central to how the family exists. The Simpsons' relationship with television is structural. They are constituted by it. Their jokes, their references, their shared language as a family are largely a language of television. Homer quotes shows. Bart reenacts scenes. The family's collective memory is in significant part a memory of things they watch together, a shared archive of images and lines and moments that have become their shorthand for being a family. This is a very specific observation about a very specific period of American life, the period of broadcast television's dominance, when the shared cultural experience of watching the same things at the same time created a common language across family and community and nation. The Simpsons emerged at the end of this period and documented it with the loving detail of something that understands it is watching something pass. The television in the living room is not just furniture. It is the family's altar. It is where they gather. It is what they face together. The couch is angled toward it. The living room is organized around it. Everything in the visual grammar of the Simpson family's domestic life points toward the screen. And what is on the screen is something watching back. Something aware of being watched. Something that, if you look at it long enough and with enough attention, begins to look like a mirror. You are watching a family watch television. The family on the television is watching television. Somewhere in that recursion is a true thing about the relationship between American families and the screens they have arranged their lives around. The show has always known it was in that recursion. It has lived inside it for 36 years. It has been both the television the family watches and the television we watch the family on, simultaneously without resolving the paradox. Just living in it. Just being both things at once. That is Springfield. That is what Springfield does. It lives in the thing that cannot be resolved and makes a home there, and calls it normal and invites you in. Come in. The TV is on. Section 10. Homer's Jobs. A complete survey of everything Homer Simpson has tried to be. Homer Simpson has held, by some counts, over 200 jobs across the run of the series. He has been a food critic, a bodyguard, a country music singer, a truck driver, a plumber, a professional boxer, a carny, a missionary, an astronaut, a paparazzo, a restaurateur, a school bus driver, a blackjack dealer, a police officer, a movie producer, an inventor, a sanitation commissioner, a ski lodge operator, a voice actor for a cartoon pig, and famously, repeatedly, always a safety inspector at the Springfield nuclear power plant. He has been an entrepreneur and a laborer, a creative and a bureaucrat. He has held jobs that require physical skill he does not possess, and jobs that require intellectual rigor he cannot sustain, and jobs that require social finesse he is constitutionally incapable of performing. He has failed at most of them. He has succeeded at some of them briefly. He has succeeded at a few of them in ways that the show treats as genuine, as actually good, as evidence that Homer contains more capability than his daily life would suggest. And then the episode ends and he is back at the nuclear plant, at his station, asleep at the console with a donut in his hand. The job episode is one of the show's most reliable formats and one of its most revealing. The pattern is almost always the same. Homer discovers or stumbles into a new opportunity. He pursues it with the specific enthusiasm he brings to anything that seems like it might be better than his current situation, which is the enthusiasm of a man who has not fully given up, who still believes that the right door has not yet been opened, who carries inside his damaged and cheerful brain the persistent conviction that somewhere out there is a version of his life that fits him perfectly. He excels at the new thing, briefly, because the new thing plays to some capability of Homer's that his regular life does not access. And then something goes wrong, his incompetence surfaces, or the situation produces consequences he did not anticipate, or the world simply arranges itself in the specific way the world arranges itself for Homer, which is inconveniently, and the job ends, and he goes back to the plant. What the pattern of Homer's jobs communicates across 200 iterations is something the show can only say through accumulation. No single job episode tells you everything. But 200 job episodes, held in the mind simultaneously, produce a portrait of a man whose talents are real but scattered, whose enthusiasm is genuine but poorly directed, whose life has never found the shape that would contain him correctly. Homer was not designed for the job he has. The nuclear plant is not the right place for a man with Homer's particular combination of gifts and limitations. The show has been explicit about this in multiple ways. His IQ is low, his attention is poor, his risk assessment is absent, his relationship to authority is that of a man who respects it just enough to show up, but not enough to take it seriously. None of these are qualities you want in a safety inspector at a nuclear facility. But Homer has qualities the plant does not need, and the world has never known what to do with. He is, in the right circumstances, genuinely creative. His solutions to problems are lateral in ways that occasionally produce results no conventional approach would have reached. He is emotionally generous in a way that makes him, in certain contexts, an unexpectedly effective leader, not because he commands respect, but because people like him, because his warmth is real, and his belief in the people around him is sincere even when it is uncritical. He has an appetite for experience that borders on the spectacular, a willingness to throw himself into things with a completeness that is simultaneously his greatest flaw and his most attractive quality. These are the qualities that his various jobs occasionally unlock. The food critic who eats with genuine pleasure. The bodyguard who protects his client with an absolute conviction that the client matters. The country music singer who performs with the unself-consciousness of someone who has never learned to be embarrassed by his own desire to be heard. In these moments, Homer is not a failure. He is a man doing something he is suited for. The tragedy is not that he cannot succeed. It is that the structures available to him, the jobs the economy offers, the opportunities Springfield produces, almost never match his actual configuration. He keeps trying jobs that do not fit and failing at them, and returning to the job that does not fit either, and the whole cycle is the show's most sustained meditation on the gap between who people are and what the world offers them. Most people do not get to find the job that fits them. Most people take the job that is available, that pays enough, that does not require skills they do not have, that does not ask too much, and does not give enough. Homer takes job after job in the hope that the next one will be the one, and it never is. And he goes back to the plant, and the plant is still there, and Burns still does not know his name, and Homer presses whatever button he presses and eats whatever donut he eats and goes home. Home is the one thing Homer is genuinely good at. Not the job. The going home. Section 11. What Burns built. The infrastructure of control in a town that belongs to one man. Charles Montgomery Burns did not build Springfield. Springfield was there before him. It had its own history, its own geography, its own people, its own sense of itself. Before the man with the cracked cooling towers and the ancient grudges and the face that glows green on certain evenings arrived and decided to own it. But Burns built Springfield's present. He built the infrastructure that Springfield runs on. He built the power plant that gives the town its electricity and its pollution and its most visible landmark. He built the economic relationships that make his employment the cornerstone of Springfield's working-class stability. He built the political relationships that make accountability to his facility essentially impossible. He has been building these things for longer than most of Springfield's residents have been alive, and the result is a town that cannot exist without him and cannot fully acknowledge what he is. This is a very specific kind of power. Not the power of violence or direct coercion. Burns rarely uses those tools, except in the specific and instructive moments when the show needs to remind you that he is capable of it. The power Burns holds over Springfield is the power of necessity. He is necessary. His plant is necessary. His employment is necessary. The lights that come on when residents flip switches are his lights. The electricity that runs the schools and the hospital and every business in town comes from his facility. Springfield is dependent on Burns in the way that a circulatory system is dependent on a heart, and Burns has spent over a century ensuring that this dependency is total. The show has examined this dependency from multiple angles across its run, always arriving at the same uncomfortable place. Springfield knows what Burns is. The town has seen the three-eyed fish. The town has experienced his schemes. The town has watched him steal the sun, threaten to release a plague, destroy civic institutions for profit, and fail to know the name of an employee who has worked for him for decades. The town knows, and the town stays. Because the alternative, the town without the plant, without the employment, without the electricity, is a town that does not function, and a town that does not function is not a town at all. Burns understands this perfectly. He has always understood it. His longevity is extraordinary, is impossible, is the product of medical intervention and accumulated wealth, and the kind of spite that keeps certain people alive out of sheer determination to outlast everyone who has ever wronged them. His longevity has given him the time to construct a dependency so complete that no generation of Springfield residents has ever experienced the town without him. They have no memory of a pre-burned Springfield. Whatever the town was before the plant, whatever organizing principle governed its economy and its self-conception before the reactor went in, is beyond living memory. Burns is prior to living memory. He is the condition of Springfield's existence, not a feature of it. You can no more imagine Springfield without Burns than you can imagine it without the river or the gorge or the tire fire. He has made himself environmental. This is the most sophisticated thing Burns has ever done, more sophisticated than any individual scheme or act of corporate villainy. He has made himself into a fact of the landscape. He has made his presence in Springfield feel as natural and as permanent as geography. And because he has been doing this for over a century, because the dependency has been total across multiple generations, Springfield has no collective memory of a time before the dependency, and therefore no imagination of a time after it. The town cannot even conceive of life without Burns clearly enough to be angry at him effectively. The anger comes in, flashes the mob that gathers, the confrontation that briefly threatens, the candidate who runs on a platform of accountability and briefly makes Burns nervous. But it dissipates. It always dissipates. Because the anger requires that Springfield imagine itself without Burns, and Springfield cannot hold that image. The image dissolves into practical anxiety, into the specific terror of lights that do not come on, of jobs that do not exist, of a town that has been built around one man's enterprise and has no alternative economic infrastructure and therefore no alternative future. Burns knows this. He has always known this. Every action he takes is in service of this knowledge of maintaining the dependency, of ensuring that Springfield's inability to function without him is never reduced, never found alternatives, never healed into genuine economic independence. The plant violations that should have been fixed 30 years ago have not been fixed because fixing them would cost money, yes, but also because a fully functional, fully compliant plant would be a plant that the town could, in theory, transfer to new ownership, operate differently. Imagine a different future for a plant full of violations is a plant that requires Burns specifically his relationships, his legal maneuvering, his specific brand of corruption to keep running. The violations are not just negligence. They are governance. Homer's job is part of this governance. Homer's incompetence is not incidental to his employment. It is the employment. A competent safety inspector would close the plant. A competent safety inspector would document the violations, would report up the chain, would force the legal and regulatory confrontation that Burns has been avoiding for 30 years. Homer does not do this because Homer is not capable of doing this, not because Burns made him incompetent, but because Burns recognized and retained the incompetence that already existed, that the radiation and the crayon and the specific way Springfield's environment shapes the minds of the people who live in it had already produced. Homer is Burns's best employee because Homer cannot be a threat. Homer works at the plant because the plant needs someone at Homer's station, and because Homer's specific configuration of limitation ensures that the station remains occupied without the station being actually operated in any meaningful sense. Homer is a human prop. He fills the position of safety inspector without performing the function of safety inspector, and this is exactly what Burns requires. The whole town works this way. Every institution in Springfield, every official, every authority figure functions in this same basic mode, occupying a position without performing its function, filling a slot without providing its service, maintaining the appearance of governance and accountability and public safety while the actual governance and accountability and public safety are managed by Burns according to Burns's priorities. This is what Burns built. Not the plant, not the infrastructure, the normalization of this arrangement, the town's acceptance of it, the generations of Springfield residents who grew up inside it and learned to navigate it and call it reality because they have never seen anything else. That is what he built, and it is, in its way, more durable than the plant. The plant can be shut down, the dependency can be addressed, the violations can, in theory, be corrected, but the normalization, the way Springfield has learned to accept Burns as a condition of existence rather than a choice that can be unchosen, that is harder to dismantle. That is the thing that persists even when the man himself is absent. That is the real structure, the invisible infrastructure, the thing Burns has spent over a century constructing. He built it 1 year at a time, one dependency at a time, one generation at a time. And Springfield lives inside it. And the lights come on when residents flip switches, and no one asks whose lights they are. Section 12. The neighborhood. What happens when people know each other for 36 years? Evergreen Terrace has been a street for 36 years. The same houses, the same yards, the same neighbors knowing each other's business in the specific way that neighbors in a close neighborhood know each other not through intimacy or friendship necessarily, but through proximity, through the accumulation of overheard conversations and observed habits and small interactions that add up over decades, to a kind of knowledge that is not friendship but is something more durable than casual acquaintance. Homer and Ned Flanders have been neighbors for 36 years. This is a relationship the show has thought about more carefully than it is usually given credit for, because the Homer-Ned dynamic is easy to read as simple the slob and the saint, the believer and the skeptic, the man who tries too hard and the man who does not try hard enough, and this reading is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It misses the thing underneath the dynamic, which is that Homer and Ned have been living 30 feet apart for their entire adult lives, and this fact has produced something that neither of them would choose and neither of them can escape and neither of them, at the final calculation, would actually want to. They know each other. In the deep, involuntary way that neighbors know each other, Ned knows Homer's habits, his schedule, his specific brand of chaos, and how it will manifest on any given afternoon. Homer knows Ned's rhythms, his routines, the particular way Ned goes about his life that is so different from Homer's own way of going about his life that it functions as a continuous, passive commentary on everything Homer does. Ned does not comment. He does not need to. His mere existence next door, his cheerful maintenance of his lawn and his faith and his unfailing courtesy, is a comment on Homer's life delivered in the language of proximity. Homer resents this and does not fully understand why he resents it. The show has been honest about the complexity of this resentment across many episodes. It is not simple jealousy. Though jealousy is in it, it is something more uncomfortable. It is the resentment of a man who is reminded daily by the evidence of his neighbor's life that a different kind of life is possible. That discipline and faith and careful attention to the way you live are things that produce visible results. That the gap between Homer's life and Ned's life is not cosmic or predetermined, but is in part a consequence of choices, of the absence of choices Homer never made, the structures Homer never built. Homer cannot look at this directly. It is too uncomfortable, so he channels the discomfort into the specific kind of neighborly friction that the show has cataloged across 36 years. The pranks that are not quite pranks, the borrowing that is not quite borrowing, the casual disregard for Ned's property and patience, and good faith that keeps the resentment in a form Homer can manage, which is a form that does not require self-examination. And Ned absorbs it. Because Ned was conditioned to absorb it. Because Ned does not have access to his own anger in a direct or functional way. Because the man who lives next to Homer and has endured decades of his carelessness and his intrusions and his specific brand of well-meaning destruction has a psychological architecture that routes all of his responses through a filter of forgiveness and grace that was installed by a psychiatrist when he was a child, and the filter works, and Ned forgives, and Homer does something else that requires forgiveness, and the cycle continues. But the neighborhood has other relationships too. The neighborhood is a community in the specific sense that a stable, long-established neighborhood produces community, a collection of people who share a geography and who have been shaped by that sharing into a particular social organism. Patty and Selma across a certain relational distance, the Lovejoys in their pastorate, the school families overlapping at the elementary and through Bart's various legal proceedings, the neighborhood bar and the neighborhood diner, and the neighborhood nuclear plant, providing the economic skeleton around which all the social connective tissue grows. What 36 years of neighborhood looks like on Evergreen Terrace is this: people who have been through things together. Not by choice necessarily, not because they are the people each other would have chosen, but because they were there. Because when Maud Flanders died, the Simpsons were there, complicated and imperfect and present, which is what neighbors are. Because when Homer had his medical crises and his professional disasters and his periodic confrontations with the consequences of his own behavior, Ned was there, not always understanding, not always helpful, but there. Because being there is what neighbors do, and being there for 36 years is what community means when community is working at its most basic level. The neighborhood is not warm in the way that the show's most sentimental moments are warm. It is warm in the way that the durable and the familiar are warm, the warmth of something that has outlasted the conditions that originally produced it, that has become a fact of the landscape, that is simply there, and has been there, and will be there, in the same specific way that the cracked cooling towers are there, and the tire fire is there, and Springfield is Springfield. You did not choose this neighborhood. You live in it anyway. And, after 36 years, the living in it has become the thing itself. The neighborhood is the relationship, the street is the community. The proximity, maintained across decades without resolution, has produced something. It is called home. Section 13, Lisa in the world. What happens to the smartest person in Springfield? When Springfield is the whole world. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old. She has been 8 years old for 36 years. She has been the smartest person in her classroom, her family, and frequently her entire town for 36 years. And she has spent those 36 years learning over and over, in different configurations and with different specific disappointments, what it means to be brilliant in a place that does not know what to do with brilliance. The Lisa episodes are the show's most politically engaged, and also its most emotionally honest, and these two qualities are not usually in tension in the way they often are in political storytelling. When the show gives an episode over to Lisa's cause environmental protection, vegetarianism, animal rights, feminist critique, academic honesty, the specific injustice of a world that rewards performance over substance, the episode is usually not propaganda for the cause. It is a portrait of someone with a cause and what it costs to have one, and what it means to be right in a place that is not interested in being corrected. Lisa is right about most things she is right about. The show does not undermine her positions. The vegetarianism is treated as a genuine ethical commitment, not a phase. The environmental activism is treated as a reasonable response to observable facts. The feminist critiques she makes of the toys she is given and the career paths available to her and the way the school treats female students relative to male students, these are treated as accurate analyses, not as the overcorrections of a child who has read too many books. But being right does not help Lisa in Springfield. Being right and being alone with your rightness in a community organized around different priorities is simply a different kind of being wrong. You have the correct information and the incorrect social situation, and the social situation is what determines your daily experience, not the information. Lisa has been in this position for 36 years. She has dealt with it in different ways across different episodes by finding temporary communities of people who share her values, by throwing herself into causes with a completeness that occasionally tips into self-destructive overcommitment, by retreating into music and reading and the interior life that does not require Springfield to validate it. She has had friendships that formed and dissolved. She has had teachers who saw her and teachers who processed her. She has had moments of genuine community and extended periods of isolation. The pattern across all of it is this: Lisa keeps going. She does not stop caring about the things she cares about. She does not stop being right about them. She does not stop hoping that the next episode will be the one where caring and being right produces something, where the world around her moves, even slightly, in the direction she has been pushing. This persistence is the most remarkable thing about Lisa, more remarkable than her intelligence or her talent or her moral clarity. The persistence in the face of a world that does not reward it. The continued engagement with a community that has disappointed her repeatedly. The saxophone that keeps playing in the window of a house in a town that does not particularly want to hear it. There is an element of the show's portrayal of Lisa that is more painful than it is usually acknowledged to be. The flash-forward episodes that show adult Lisa, the college student, the professional, the person who grew into the potential the show has always attributed to her, are almost always located outside Springfield. Adult Lisa is always somewhere else. Whatever she becomes it by leaving. The show cannot imagine Lisa flourishing in Springfield because Springfield is not built for people like Lisa to flourish in. And so the show gives her the future she deserves by taking her out of the present she is trapped in. The 8-year-old who keeps asking questions that Springfield does not want to answer will, eventually, find the place where the questions are welcome. She will find the world that was built for her. She will leave, but that is later. That is always later. Now she is 8. Now she is in the window. Now she is playing the saxophone into the Springfield night, and the music goes out into the air that everyone breathes and nobody stops to listen except the occasional viewer who is paying attention to the right things. She keeps playing. The world does not always stop to listen. She keeps playing anyway. That is the whole of it, really. That is what it means to be Lisa Simpson for 36 years. To keep playing. To keep being right. To keep persisting in a world that has consistently, patiently, gently, and sometimes not so gently, declined to be the world you need it to be. And to be, despite all of this, still there, still 8, still at the window, still playing. Section 14. What the show knows about America. The diagnosis behind the comedy. The Simpsons is a show about America, not about all of America. About a particular America working class, post-industrial, organized around the economics of a company town, suspicious of expertise, prone to collective delusion, capable of extraordinary generosity and extraordinary cruelty, organized around a set of values it does not always live up to, and a set of stories about itself that are not fully true. This is not all of America, but it is a significant portion of it. It is the America that most Americans live nearest to, geographically or economically or culturally, even if they do not live inside it directly. The show began in 1989 which means it was born in the twilight of a particular moment in American working-class life. The moment when the industrial economy that had organized the lives of families like the Simpsons for 2 generations was beginning its long, incomplete, officially unacknowledged decline. The steel mills and the auto plants and the manufacturing facilities that had given men like Homer Simpson, men with no particular credential, no particular educational achievement, no particular talent beyond showing up and doing a job, a stable income and a pension and a house on a street and a sense of participation in the economy. These were beginning. In 1989, the long process of contraction. Homer's job at the nuclear plant is, in this context, a 1,989 joke about job security. The nuclear plant is absurd, yes, but it is also the last surviving version of the kind of employment that Homer's demographic had historically been able to access. He has a union job. He has benefits. He has apparently a high enough income to own a house and support a family of 5. The job is a disaster in terms of his performance of it and the safety of the facility, but the job is there. The job is stable. The job will, apparently, be there until Homer retires. This is already a fantasy. It was a fantasy in 1989, and it became more clearly a fantasy with each passing year of the show's run. The Homer Simpsons of the real America do not have stable union jobs at industrial facilities. The Homer Simpsons of the real America have had those jobs taken, moved, restructured, automated. They are at the plant one year and not at the plant the next year, and the town built around the plant is renegotiating its entire sense of itself in the absence of the thing that organized it. Springfield does not experience this. Springfield's economy is anchored permanently in Burns's facility. The plant is always there, the employment is always available, the disaster is always theoretical, the meltdown that almost happens, the contamination that is always deferred, the crisis that resolves before the actual consequences arrive. Springfield is frozen in a version of the American working-class town that the real America was already beginning to lose when the show first aired. This makes Springfield, in retrospect, a kind of archive, a preserved specimen. The town that kept its factory when the factories left everywhere else. The town whose economy was never disrupted by the forces that disrupted everything around it. The town that is still running the same industrial model that the rest of the country has spent 36 years restructuring away from. And the residents of this town are the people that model produces. They are not stupid. The show is always careful about this, always distinguishing between the limitations of Homer's specific brain and the limitations of his circumstances, always showing you the intelligence that Springfield's people have alongside the structures that prevent it from going anywhere particularly useful. They are not lazy. They are not without values or without care for their community or without the specific kind of competence that their specific kind of life requires. They are caught. They are caught inside a system that was designed to serve someone else's interests, and that has never been accountable to them in the way that a genuine democracy would require a system to be accountable. They live inside Burns's town, and they know, on some level, that it is Burns's town, and they do not know what to do about this because the tools for doing something about it, political organization, collective action, the systematic documentation of harm, are exactly the tools that the system has spent decades making unavailable to them. The show knows this. It has always known this. The satire of Springfield's political institutions, of its media, of its legal system, of its medical establishment, of every structure that should be accountable to ordinary residents, and this satire is not generic anti-institutional cynicism. It is specific. It is the satire of someone who has watched these structures fail the same people over and over, and who knows the mechanisms of the failure in enough detail to render them precisely. Springfield's mayor is corrupt. Not comically corrupt, actually corrupt, in the way that small city mayors in captured political economies are actually corrupt. His corruption has specific beneficiaries and specific costs, and the costs fall on the residents of the town, and the benefits flow upward to Burns. This is the shape of the corruption. It has always been this shape, and the residents vote for him anyway, because the alternative is unknown and the known devil is navigable, because political change requires energy and belief in the efficacy of change, and the town's energy has been depleted by the same forces that depleted everything else, and the belief has been worn down by repeated experience of the gap between what change promises and what it delivers. Springfield is not a joke about American politics. It is a map of it. It is a detailed, affectionate, furious, despairing, occasionally hopeful map of what it looks like when the institutions fail and the people inside them adapt and go on living. The people of Springfield go on living. That is what they do. They absorb the pollution and the corruption and the institutional incompetence and the billionaire who owns their electricity, and they go on living. They show up at the plant. They send their kids to the school. They eat at the Krusty Burger. They go to the church where God talks to Homer and ignores Ned. They watch the Itchy and Scratchy show. They go home. That is America. That is the specific America the show has been diagnosing for 36 years. The America that keeps going. That absorbs everything and keeps going. That is permanently on the verge of something and permanently, stubbornly, still there. Springfield is still there. Every Sunday at 8. After everything. Still there. Section 15. The things that don't get fixed. Springfield's relationship with consequences and what that relationship reveals. There is a tire fire in Springfield. It has been burning for many years. The show does not specify exactly when the tire fire started. It is simply present in the show's visual vocabulary for Springfield. One of the background details that recurs in establishing shots of the town, alongside the nuclear cooling towers, and the water tower, and the church steeple to signal that you are in Springfield and not somewhere else. The tire fire is Springfield. It is part of the town's identity, the way certain kinds of industrial damage become part of the identities of the real towns they happen to. It has never been extinguished. The town has acknowledged it. Characters have mentioned it. Episodes have referenced it. But nobody has put it out. Nobody has organized a community effort to address it. Nobody has called in the state EPA or the fire department or any of the other agencies that would, in a functional municipal environment, be responsible for addressing an ongoing environmental hazard of this kind. The tire fire burns. Springfield continues. The two facts coexist without resolution. The tire fire is Springfield's most visible symbol of what the show calls, in its patient and accumulative way, the permanent broken thing. The thing that cannot be fixed because fixing it would require someone to take responsibility for how it started. And taking responsibility is the one act that Springfield's social contract is organized to prevent. There are many permanent broken things in Springfield. The tire fire is the most visible, but there is also the state of the nuclear plant's safety systems, which have been in violation of federal standards for the entirety of the show's run and which are addressed episodically in moments of crisis and then allowed to return to their broken state as the crisis resolves. There is the state of the river, which has been receiving radioactive waste and industrial runoff for decades and which has produced at least one three-eyed fish and presumably many more changes that the show has not fully cataloged. There is the state of the town's roads, its public buildings, its parks, its institutions, all of which exist in a state of chronic undermaintenance that is the aesthetic signature of a community whose public resources are systematically diverted elsewhere. These broken things persist because fixing them requires the same thing. Fixing the tire fire requires acknowledging how they got broken, identifying who is responsible, holding that party accountable, and extracting from them the cost of repair. In Springfield, none of these steps are available. The identification of responsibility points to Burns. The accountability mechanisms have been neutralized by Burns. The cost of repair would come from Burns, and Burns does not pay for repairs, because paying for repairs would mean acknowledging damage, and acknowledging damage would mean acknowledging causation, and acknowledging causation would mean acknowledging Burns. So the tire fire burns. What is interesting about the tire fire, what makes it more than just a visual gag about environmental dysfunction, is what the town's relationship with it reveals about normalization. The tire fire is not normal. It is objectively abnormal. It is the kind of thing that, in a town that was functioning properly, would be treated as an emergency, as a crisis, as an unacceptable ongoing harm that required immediate and sustained attention. And in Springfield, it is furniture. It is background detail. It is the thing in the establishing shot that you eventually stop noticing because it is always there. This is what normalization looks like at its most complete. Not denial. Springfield does not deny the tire fire. The town knows the fire is there. Characters mention it with the offhand familiarity of people who have lived beside something long enough that it has ceased to alarm them. The tire fire is visible from my house. This fact is delivered with the same affect as my neighbor has loud parties. Not without complaint, but without urgency. Without the urgency that something burning and toxic and ongoing should produce. The tire fire is the show's clearest image of what happens to broken things when they are never fixed. They become ordinary. They become part of the scenery. They become the background against which life is lived rather than the emergency that requires life to pause. There is an episode where the tire fire is briefly put out. For one episode, Springfield is without its burning landmark. And then, within the logic of the episode, the fire returns. The resolution of the crisis is temporary. The broken thing reasserts itself. The tire fire is back in the establishing shot. The show does not explain this. It does not need to. You already know why the broken things come back. They come back because the conditions that created them have not been addressed, and until those conditions are addressed, the specific manifestation of the damage can be temporarily suppressed, but not actually healed. You can put out the fire. The waste that fuels it is still in the ground. The tires are still there. The conditions that made this place a site for illegal dumping are still in place. The fire will come back. Springfield's broken things are structural. They are the visible symptoms of a structural condition that the town does not have the tools or the will or the freedom from its own dependencies to address. The tire fire is the tire fire. But the tire fire is also the plant and the river and the water table and the four-fingered yellow-skinned children and the three-eyed fish and the billionaire who glows green once a week and the principal who is not who he says he is. The broken things in Springfield are not separate problems. They are one problem. They are the problem. And the problem has been burning, visibly, in the establishing shots of the town for 36 years. It is still burning. It will be burning next week. You can see it from Homer's house. Section 16. The couch. What the family keeps coming back to and why it matters. The couch is where the family sits. This is the most obvious sentence in the entire script. The couch is where the family sits. The couch is the destination of the opening credits, the object toward which the family is always hurtling, the endpoint of every iteration of the theme. Homer from the plant, Marge from the supermarket, Bart from the school, Lisa from the band room, Maggie from wherever Maggie is, they converge on the couch. They land on it, the music resolves. The episode begins. The couch is the axis of the Simpson family's shared domestic life. It is where they watch television together, which is to say, it is where they are together in the most casual and most reliable way that this family is together, not in the heightened moments of crisis and reconciliation that the plots produce, but in the ordinary ambient togetherness of people who are in the same room pointing themselves in the same direction. The couch is where they default to. It is the family's resting state. The couch gag, the brief animated sequence that precedes every episode and sends the family toward the couch in some new, strange, or impossible configuration, is one of the show's oldest and most beloved traditions and one of its most formally experimental. In 36 years, the couch gag has included parodies of other animated shows, collaborations with contemporary artists, sequences that run 30 seconds and sequences that run 4 minutes, gags that are instantly funny and gags that are meditative, and gags that are deliberately disturbing, and gags that appear to be about something other than the couch entirely until the final moment, when the family is on the couch and the gag resolves. The couch gag is what you get when you take a structural necessity. The show needs a brief sequence between the chalkboard and the episode proper and give it to a writer's room full of people who are constitutionally incapable of doing the same thing twice. The couch gag should be a transitional moment, a brief clearing of the throat before the story begins. But the show could not let it be only that. It turned the transition into a canvas. It made the nothing before the story into a story. This is what The Simpsons does with almost everything. It takes the structural requirement, the formal convention, the thing that is there because it has to be there, and it finds the creative space inside it and fills that space with something specific and alive. The chalkboard is a punishment. The couch gag is a transition. The theme song is an introduction. In other hands, these are just the machinery of the form. In this show, they are where some of the most interesting work happens. The couch itself, the actual piece of furniture, has a quality in the show's visual design that is worth noticing. It is not a glamorous couch. It is not a designer piece or an aspirational object. It is the couch of a family with a modest income and practical tastes. A couch that looks like it has been sat on by 5 people for 36 years, which it has. A couch that is the right size for the family and no bigger, that fits the living room without filling it, that is present and functional and entirely unspectacular. This couch is one of the show's most honest visual details. The Simpson family does not have a better couch. They have this couch. And this couch is where they sit and where they watch and where they exist in the easy proximity of people who share a home and where the family is the family in its most unremarkable and most essential form. When the couch gag ends and the family is on the couch in whatever impossible configuration the gag has produced, the episode begins. The story begins. The complication arrives. The plot produces its crisis and its comedy and its resolution, and then the episode ends, and the family is back on the couch, and the freeze frame holds, and the credits roll. The couch is the beginning and the end. The family leaves it and returns to it. The show starts there and stops there. Every episode is a loop from the couch to the couch, with Springfield in between. That is the shape of the show. That is the shape of the family. That is maybe the shape of most lives when you reduce them to their essential structure, not the adventures or the disasters or the moments of triumph, but the couch you come back to, and the people who are there when you come back, and the way it feels to sit down after everything and be still. The couch is where you rest, where you watch, where you do not have to do anything except be present in the company of the people you came home to. The family is on the couch. They have always been on the couch. They will always be on the couch. And somehow, in some way that is very hard to articulate but very easy to feel, this is enough. This has always been enough. Section 17. Grandpa Simpson and the Weight of Time. The man who remembers everything Springfield has decided to forget. Abraham Simpson is old. This is the beginning of every observation you can make about the character. He is the oldest member of the Simpson family. He has the longest memory. He has the most experience. He has lived through more versions of America, more wars, more economic cycles, more cultural upheavals, more technological changes than any other character on the show. He has the perspective that comes from having been present for many of the events that shape the world his children and grandchildren inhabit. He is, by any measure, a repository of exactly the kind of knowledge and experience that a healthy community transmits between generations. And nobody listens to him. Not because Grandpa is foolish. The show does not render him as a fool. He is confused sometimes, certainly, and his stories wander and his sense of the present is intermittently unreliable, and he conflates historical events and makes references that nobody around him recognizes, because the people around him do not share his frame of reference. But when Grandpa is lucid, when the fog lifts, and the man who served in the war, and navigated the Depression, and raised a family, and buried a wife, and made a deal with Burns to protect his son, is present and speaking clearly, what he says is worth hearing. The problem is that Springfield does not know how to hear it. Springfield has organized its relationship with its oldest residents the way it has organized its relationship with most uncomfortable truths, by institutionalizing them. By creating a designated space for them, the retirement home, and placing them there, and visiting occasionally with the guilt of people who know they are not visiting enough, and returning to their regular lives with the vague assurance that the problem of old age has been managed rather than faced. The Springfield Retirement Castle is one of the show's most consistently grim background institutions. Not grim in the way of explicit neglect or cruelty, the show does not render the retirement home as a horror. It is grim in the quieter way, in the way that places designed to store rather than serve are grim. The residents are present and cared for in the minimal sense of that phrase, and largely invisible to the town outside. They exist. They are warehoused. They will eventually not exist. The town moves on. Grandpa's relationship with Homer is the show's most sustained exploration of what happens to the bond between a father and son when the son grew up with a father who was not enough, and the father grows old with a son who is not there. Abe was not a good father to Homer. The show has documented this across many episodes. In the backstory episodes that reveal the specific ways Abe's emotional absence shaped Homer's desperate need for warmth and approval, In the episodes that bring Abe and Homer together as adults and show the specific awkwardness of two people who love each other and have never learned how to say it, the relationship is damaged. It is also, in the specific way that damaged relationships between parents and children often are still a relationship, still operative, still carrying weight. There is an episode 1 of the Great Quiet episodes in which Homer visits Abe at the retirement home, and Abe tells Homer a story about the past. Not an important story, not a plot-relevant story, a story about a thing that happened a long time ago that Abe remembers and wants to tell his son. And Homer listens. He does not listen perfectly. He does not listen with the focused, undivided attention that the moment perhaps deserves. But he is there. He is present. He lets his father talk. And Abe talks. With the specific gratitude of a man who is not often permitted to talk, who has been placed somewhere that the world does not expect to hear from, who has learned to keep most of his stories inside because the people around him have things to do and lives to live and cannot always accommodate the pace at which old age moves and speaks. He talks to his son. His son is there. That moment is worth more than most of what happens in the episodes built around larger events. It is the show at its most genuinely truthful, not about Springfield specifically, not about burns or radiation or the show's mythology, but about something that happens between fathers and sons in the last chapters of the fathers' lives, and about what it means to be present for it, what it costs to be there, what it would cost to not be there. Grandpa knows things Springfield has forgotten. He was there for the things Springfield has collectively decided not to remember. He is the living archive of a town that has criminalized memory, the one remaining source of testimony that the official narrative has not fully erased, because the official narrative did not think to erase him. It just moved him to the retirement home. He sits in the retirement home, and he talks to the other residents, and he tells his stories, and mostly nobody listens. And occasionally Homer visits, and Homer is not always paying attention, but Homer is there. And that, in Springfield, is a kind of miracle. Section 18. The Last Ordinary Night. Everything the show has said about what matters, gathered into one final image. Imagine a Thursday night on Evergreen Terrace. Nothing is happening. There is no crisis, no scheme, no plot, no guest celebrity arriving to disrupt the family's routine, no Mr. Burns' machination threatening the town, no mystery to be solved, no lesson to be learned in the final act. It is Thursday night on Evergreen Terrace, and nothing is happening except life. Homer is in the kitchen. He is making himself a snack. He is not thinking about anything in particular, or rather, he is thinking about the snack, about the specific pleasures of a late-night refrigerator visit, about the small, uncomplicated satisfaction of finding exactly what you were hoping to find. His hair is slightly flattened from hours on the couch. He is wearing a white shirt and his regular pants. He is, at this moment, entirely himself. Marge is upstairs. She is in bed, not yet asleep. She has a book open in front of her, but she is not reading it. She is listening to the house, the specific sounds of her family at rest, the familiar creaks of the building she has lived in long enough that she knows every one of them by sound. She knows Homer is in the kitchen by the sound of the refrigerator. She knows the children are in their rooms by the quality of the silence from their corners of the house. She knows her home. She lies in the dark and knows her home. Bart is awake in his room. He should be asleep. He is not asleep. He is thinking about something, planning something, or replaying something from the day, or just lying there in the specific half-awake state of a child who has not yet fully surrendered to sleep. His room is in moderate disorder. The skateboard is in the corner. The Krusty the Clown memorabilia is on the walls. He is 10 years old and does not always know what he is feeling, but he knows tonight is a regular night and regular nights are, mostly, good. Lisa is asleep. She fell asleep with a book, and the book is open on her chest, and she is breathing the slow breathing of genuine rest. She had a good day, not a triumphant day, not the kind of day where something she cared about was recognized or a wrong was corrected, just a quiet day. A day with some reading and some music, and a moment in the afternoon when she sat by the window and watched the light change and felt, briefly, the specific peace of being exactly where you are without needing it to be anywhere else. Maggie is asleep in her crib. Maggie is always technically asleep in her crib when nothing else is happening, though, if you watched her carefully, you might notice the eyes behind the closed lids moving in ways that suggest something else is happening, has always been happening, in the dream or the thought or the plan that Maggie keeps inside her small, extraordinary skull. She is a year old. She has been a year old for 36 years. She is patient in the way that only someone certain of their own eventual moment can be patient. The house is quiet. The street is quiet. Springfield is quiet in the way that a town with a nuclear plant and a tire fire and a river full of radioactive waste can be quiet, not truly quiet, but quiet in the sense that the noise has receded to background, to ambience, to the texture of the environment rather than the subject of it. Homer finishes his snack. He puts the plate in the sink. He turns off the kitchen light. He walks through the dark house that he knows by feel, by long habit, by the specific muscle memory of a man who has lived in the same place for decades and whose body has learned the house as well as his mind has. He knows where the step creaks. He knows the turn at the top of the stairs. He moves through his home in the dark without thinking about moving through his home in the dark, which is what home means when you have been somewhere long enough. He slides into bed beside Marge. She does not turn over. She does not say anything. She moves slightly, a small adjustment, an accommodation of his presence, and she is still again. Homer is quiet. The room is quiet. The house is quiet. Outside the window, Springfield is doing what Springfield does. The cooling towers are releasing their steam into the night sky. The tire fire is burning with a low, orange persistence at the edge of the frame. The river is moving. The stars, visible through the haze of the plant's perpetual emission, are the same stars that were there before the plant and that will be there after it. The street is empty. The houses are dark. Evergreen Terrace is sleeping. Homer and Marge are side by side in the dark, breathing. The children are in their rooms. The dog is somewhere in the house. The door is locked. The walls are holding. Nothing is happening. That is the point. Nothing is happening, and it is enough. It is more than enough. It is, when you clear away everything else, the theories and the mysteries and the satire and the 36 years of jokes and catastrophes and resets and freeze frames, it is the thing the show has always been about. The ordinary night, the family in the house, the breathing in the dark, the small, unremarkable, absolutely essential fact of everyone being there. That is Springfield. That is all of it. Every episode, every season, every theory, every question, every detail hiding in the background of every frame, it all circles back to this. To a yellow family in a yellow house on a yellow street in a town that cannot be located on any map, breathing in the dark, together. Nothing is happening. Everything is here. Sleep. Section 19. Food as a character. The things Springfield eats, and what the eating has always been about. There is a donut in Springfield that appears in more episodes than most of the show's supporting cast. It is pink. It has sprinkles. Sometimes it has a bite taken out of it, and sometimes it is whole, and sometimes it is one of dozens arranged in a box that Homer is carrying with a reverence that is usually reserved for objects of genuine significance. The donut is not a plot device. It is not a symbol that the writers have consciously chosen to layer with meaning. And yet, across 36 years of episodes, the pink sprinkled donut has accumulated so many appearances, so many moments of focus, so many frames in which Homer's eyes meet it and something animal and unguarded passes across his face, that the donut has become something the show did not plan and cannot fully explain. It has become a character, a recurring presence, a visual shorthand for a particular kind of longing. Food in Springfield operates at a level that is rarely discussed when people talk about what the show actually does well. The discourse tends to focus on the jokes, on the plots, on the cultural commentary, on the characters' psychological depth, but underneath all of that, running through every season, present in almost every episode, is a continuous, detailed, and emotionally sophisticated portrayal of the relationship between a working-class family and food. What they eat, how they eat, when they eat, what they cannot afford to eat, what they eat instead of dealing with something difficult, what they eat because it is the one uncomplicated pleasure available to them. Homer Simpson eats the way a person eats when they have decided, at some deep level, that the body deserves to be rewarded for enduring things. His relationship with food is not casual. It is not background. It is one of the primary emotional languages of the character, present in the earliest episodes and never abandoned. Watch the way Homer moves toward food. Watch the specific physical vocabulary the animators developed for this. The lean forward, the widening of the eyes, the slight drop of the jaw, the sound that comes out of him, which is not quite a groan and not quite a word, but something in between that the show has used so consistently it has become iconic. That sound is not just comedy. That sound is the sound of someone who has spent their life being handed difficult things, being disappointed by systems and people and circumstances, and who has found in the experience of eating something that cannot disappoint in the same way, something that delivers exactly what it promises, every single time. Homer's food fixation began as a joke. The writers discovered early that audiences responded to it, that there was something universally recognizable about the desire to eat something good and comforting, and they leaned into it. But leaning into it meant developing it. It meant giving it history, context, emotional texture. And so, across hundreds of episodes, the show built out a portrait of a man whose relationship with food is inseparable from his relationship with everything else, with stress, with inadequacy, with joy, with the specific pleasure of sitting in front of a television at the end of a long day and eating something that does not ask anything of you. There is an episode, and this is the kind of episode the show made during its creative peak, when it was doing things that most people did not notice at the time in which Homer eats a meal alone. Marge is away. The kids are elsewhere. Homer is in the kitchen and he makes himself a sandwich, and the camera watches him eat it, not with judgment. Not with the comedic exaggeration that usually attends Homer's eating, quietly. The sandwich is nothing special. Homer eats it standing at the counter, and for a moment the show lets you sit with the image. A man in an empty house, eating alone, and the expression on his face is not sadness, not exactly, but something like it. Something like the recognition that the food tastes slightly different when there is no one else at the table. That is a remarkable thing for a comedy to do. That is the show using food to say something true about loneliness and domesticity that it could not say directly without abandoning its genre. Marge's relationship with food is almost opposite to Homer's, and the contrast between them is one of the show's most consistently illuminating character dynamics. Marge cooks. She cooks a lot. She cooks the way someone cooks when cooking is how they show love, when the preparation of a meal is an act of care that cannot easily be translated into words. She plans. She shops. She stands at the stove with a concentration that the show captures in brief, quiet background shots. Marge stirring something, Marge checking something in the oven, Marge arranging things on plates with a precision that nobody in the family will appreciate or even notice. The show has, over the years, paid attention to what Marge cooks. And what Marge cooks is aspirational in ways that her budget cannot reliably support. She follows recipes from magazines. She attempts dishes she saw on a cooking show. She wants to make beautiful food, food that signals care and effort, and a kind of domestic competence that she has tied to her sense of worth as a person. And she makes this food, this carefully prepared, genuinely loving food, and sets it on the table, and Homer looks at it and reaches for the ketchup. There is a whole essay in that moment. There is a whole conversation about value, about visibility, about the invisible labor of domestic life, and how consistently it goes unremarked and unrewarded. The show has that conversation over and over without ever announcing that it is having it. It just shows you the table. It shows you the food. It shows you who reaches for the ketchup. But then there are the other moments. The moments when Homer takes a bite of something Marge made, and his face does the thing, the real version of the thing, not the comedic version, and he looks at her, and he says something like, "Marge, this is the best thing I've ever eaten," and he means it completely, without performance or irony, and Marge's face does something quiet in response, not triumph, something more private. The recognition that she made this and he tasted it, and the communication happened, the food carried it. Springfield as a whole has a complicated relationship with food that mirrors the show's relationship with the American working class more broadly. The town has a fast food restaurant on every corner. The Krusty Burger chain is a presence in Springfield the way McDonald's is a presence in a certain kind of American town. Omnipresent, affordable, deeply familiar, and quietly terrible. Krusty Burgers are the default. They are what you eat when you are tired, when you are in a hurry, when you have not thought ahead, when thinking ahead feels like a luxury you cannot afford. The show has always been precise about the Krusty Burger's place in Springfield's food ecosystem. The Simpsons eat there, most of Springfield eats there. They eat there without particular joy, but also without the specific disgust that would require them to change their habits. The Krusty Burger is acceptable. It is familiar. It costs what they can afford to spend. And there is something the show communicates by making this the default eating experience of its main characters that no piece of critical analysis about the show has ever quite captured adequately. The Simpsons eat fast food because they are a working-class family in a post-industrial American town, and that is what working-class families in post-industrial American towns eat. Not as a moral failing, not as a joke, as a fact of their economic life, rendered in food. Contrast this with the few episodes where The Simpsons encounter fine dining. The discomfort is total. The episode Some Enchanted Evening has an early restaurant scene that is played for comedy but is fundamentally about the alienation of being in a space that was not designed for people like you, that operates according to social codes you were never taught, that communicates through food in a language you were never given access to. Homer does not know which fork to use. He does not know how to order. He does not know the expected rituals. And the comedy of that scene does not fully cover the other thing the scene is doing, which is showing you exactly how class operates through something as apparently simple as a meal. Then there is the food of Springfield celebrations, birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. The episodes built around food as ritual are among the most emotionally resonant in the show's run, because they use the preparation and consumption of specific foods to trace the shape of the family's relationships over time. The Thanksgiving episode where things go wrong, the Christmas episode where things go unexpectedly right, the birthday cake that gets dropped and is secretly reassembled. All of these are scenes about food, but none of them are really about food. They are about the hope that gathers around a meal. The hope that this particular gathering, organized around this particular table, with this particular food at its center, will be the one where everything feels as it is supposed to feel. That hope is the engine of Marge's cooking. It is the thing that drives her back to the stove before every family event, every holiday, every dinner. The possibility that the food, if it is good enough, if it is made with enough care, can create the conditions for the family to be its best version of itself. It cannot, of course. Not reliably. Not always. The food is good, and the family is still the family. Complicated and loving and exhausting in the specific ways that families are. But Marge keeps cooking, and Homer keeps eating, and the pink donut keeps appearing, and all of it, the preparation and the eating, and the longing, and the comfort, and the failure, and the occasional, unreliable success, all of it is in every frame of the food, in every meal the show has ever shown, waiting to be seen by anyone willing to watch the other parts. There is a Season 9 episode where Homer discovers he has a crayon lodged in his brain from childhood, and after it is removed, he temporarily becomes highly intelligent. In this elevated state, one of the first things he does is look at the donut he is holding and see it, really see it, with clear eyes, the fat content, the sugar, the artificial coloring, the hollowness at the center, and he puts it down. And then the intelligence is taken away, and Homer picks up the donut again, and his face does the thing. And the show does not comment. It just shows you the donut and the man and the choice, and lets you decide what it means. That is food as a character. That is the show using what people eat to say things about who they are, what they need, what they cannot see clearly, and what they choose not to see even when they can. The music inside the walls. What Alf Clausen heard that nobody else did, and what the score has been doing this whole time. There is a composer who spent 27 years scoring The Simpsons. His name is Alf Clausen. He is not a household name. Most people who have watched the show for 30 years could not tell you who wrote the music. And yet Alf Clausen's work is one of the most constant presences in the show's entire history, present in every episode from Season 2 through Season 28, shaping the emotional texture of scenes that you remember primarily as jokes or character moments or dramatic beats without realizing that the music was doing half the work. Clausen came from a jazz background. He had worked on sketch comedy and variety shows. He understood something about musical comedy that a lot of composers who approach it from a classical or orchestral background do not always grasp naturally, which is that comedy music is not about emphasizing the joke. Comedy music at its best is about creating a world so thoroughly that the jokes are not jokes anymore. They are just what happens in that world. The music is the air. The music is the temperature. The music is the specific quality of light in the room where the story is taking place. The Simpsons orchestra, which Clausen conducted live in recording sessions for most of his tenure, was a real orchestra, not a synthesized approximation, not a MIDI arrangement. A room full of human musicians reading sheet music that Clausen had written specifically for this episode, this scene, this moment in this character's experience. The brass section playing Homer's theme had played Homer's theme hundreds of times and understood, after a decade of sessions, what Homer's theme was supposed to do to the person listening. The string section knew the difference between a scene that needed warmth and a scene that needed something underneath the warmth, something unsettled. Homer's main theme is worth examining in detail because it is not the theme you think it is. The theme most people associate with Homer is the comic tuba figure, the low brass melody that plays when Homer does something foolish or impulsive. But that is only one of Homer's musical identities. Clausen wrote Homer, multiple motifs, different musical phrases that correspond to different aspects of the character, and they appear and reappear across hundreds of episodes in ways that trace Homer's emotional arc with a precision that the dialogue and the animation cannot always achieve. There is a gentler version of Homer's theme, a slower, more orchestral version that appears in the quieter domestic scenes, in the moments when Homer is sitting with his family and not doing anything, just being present, just existing in the same space as the people he loves. It is a minor key arrangement, but not a sad one. It is minor in the way that certain beautiful things are minor, in the way that certain kinds of contentment carry a faint, unremarkable sadness in them because nothing this good can last quite long enough. Clausen knew this. He wrote this into the music. And for 27 years, it played underneath scenes that viewers were laughing through, filing the emotion away somewhere they did not even know they had. Lisa's theme is the most discussed of the show's recurring musical motifs, largely because it is so explicitly present and so clearly connected to the saxophone, which is itself such an explicit symbol within the show. But the discussion of Lisa's theme tends to stop at the surface. It's sad. It's beautiful. It plays when Lisa is sad, or when something beautiful is happening. What the discussion tends to skip is the compositional sophistication underneath the simplicity. Lisa's theme is written in a way that can be harmonized from multiple directions. It is a melody that sits between keys, that can belong to a major or a minor context depending on how you approach it, and Clausen used this ambiguity across dozens of episodes to encode the same ambiguity into Lisa's character. When the theme plays in major, it is about Lisa's potential, her joy, her intellectual excitement, the parts of her that believe in the world and the people around her. When it shifts into minor, it is about Lisa's grief, her isolation, her exhaustion at being the one who sees clearly in a place that does not always reward clear sight. And very often, in the best uses of the theme, both harmonizations are present simultaneously, woven into each other in the underscore, so that the emotion the music produces is both at once joy and grief, hope and loss, the specific bittersweet frequency that Lisa Simpson lives in. You cannot produce that emotion without a real orchestra. You cannot produce it with synthesized strings. The ambiguity requires musicians who can feel the pull between the two harmonizations and lean into both of them at the same time, who understand that the point is the unresolved tension, not the resolution. Clausen understood that. He built it in. Marge's musical presence in the show is quieter than Homer's or Lisa's, less commented on, less defined by a single recognizable motif. But she is scored. The show scores her. And what the scoring does for Marge is something that the dialogue rarely does explicitly. It acknowledges her inner life. There are scenes where Marge is doing something ordinary, some domestic task, something the show is not asking you to pay special attention to, and the music under the scene shifts to something that has nothing to do with comedy and nothing to do with plot. It is just music that takes Marge seriously. Music that says this person has an inner world. Music that treats the act of Marge standing at the kitchen window and looking out as something worth scoring as though it were meaningful, which it is, which it always was. But you have to listen to the music to know that the show knows that. The couch gag theme, the short, brassy, slightly manic fanfare that plays at the opening of every episode, is so familiar to so many people that it has become sonic wallpaper. You hear it and you know where you are. It registers and recedes. But the theme was composed with a very specific quality of organized chaos to it, a sense of something slightly out of control being just barely held together, which is an almost perfect musical description of what the show is doing at any given moment. The fanfare is cheerful and driving and a little breathless, and it never fully resolves before the couch gag begins, and this means that every episode starts with the musical impression of something that has not quite landed yet, has not quite settled, is still in motion. The show has never fully settled. It has never quite landed in one genre or one mode or one emotional register. It is always in motion. The fanfare has been advertising this since 1989. Clausen's compositions for the musical episodes, and there were several, from Homer's Barbershop Quartet to All Singing, All Dancing, are a category of their own. These episodes required him to write original songs that worked both as parody and as genuine musical expressions, and the best of them are remarkable pieces of work because they do what the best musical comedy always does, which is use the conventions of musical theater to say true things in ways that a realistic scene could not accommodate. Maybe I'm amazed. In the Barbershop Quartet episode, Streetcar Named Marge and its slightly menacing, slightly beautiful songs. The You're Checkin' In number from the Betty Ford episode. These songs were written to be funny, and they are funny. And they are also more than funny. They are songs that understand the emotional texture of what they are parodying well enough to do something real with it, to pull the actual feeling up through the joke and leave you with both at once. That is what 27 years of Alf Clausen looks like when you pay attention to the score. Not a background function, not an accompaniment, a parallel narrative, running underneath the one you were watching, telling you everything the show could not say out loud. In 2017, Clausen was let go by the show. The official reason given was that the production wanted to move to a new sonic direction. He was replaced by a composer who uses digital production tools rather than a live orchestra. The sessions ended. The room full of musicians who had been playing Homer's theme for decades stopped meeting. The loss is audible if you know what you are listening for. The new scores are competent and functional. They do what they need to do. But something that was in the older episodes, a warmth, a physical presence, a quality of being made by human hands in a room, is no longer there in the same way. The music is still music. It is just not the same music. It does not have the same relationship to the silence around it. It does not breathe. Clausen's absence from the show is, in its way, a small death of something that most viewers do not know they are missing. The music changed. The world changed slightly. Springfield sounded, from season 29 onward, like a place where an orchestra had once played, a long time ago, and where the instruments had been put away. The emotion is still there. In the older episodes, put on any episode from the first 20 years and turn the volume up and just listen. Not to the dialogue, not to the jokes, but to the music underneath everything. Listen to what the brass does when Homer sees his family. Listen to what the strings do when Lisa is alone. Listen to what the oboe does in the quiet moments between the jokes. What you are hearing is someone who loved this world. Someone who spent 27 years learning its residents from the inside and writing music that honored what they felt and what they could not say. Someone who understood that Springfield was a place worth taking seriously, even especially in its silliest moments. The music has always known what the show is. For 27 years it kept saying so, quietly, underneath everything, waiting to be heard. Section 21. The dreams within the show. What Springfield does when the lights go down and the rules go away. The Simpsons has always been a show interested in the unconscious, not in a literary capital U unconscious way, not in the clinical vocabulary of psychoanalysis, but in the specific operational way that a show interested in human beings is always interested in what human beings do when they are not in control of their own stories. When the logic of waking life releases them. When the rules go soft, when anything can happen because nothing needs to make sense. The show's dream sequences are among its most formally ambitious work. They are also, paradoxically, some of its least discussed, perhaps because they resist the kind of narrative summary that makes other episodes easy to describe, perhaps because they operate in a register that feels more personal than social, more interior than comic. Dream sequences in The Simpsons are not primarily funny. They are revealing. Homer's dreams are the most frequent, and they follow a consistent internal logic that the show established early and never fully abandoned. Homer dreams in the language of desire. His unconscious is not mysterious or threatening or surreal in the way that certain characters' dream lives might be. It is direct. It is honest in the way that a place without consequences can afford to be. In Homer's dreams, the things he wants are simply there, without the mediation of politeness or social anxiety or practicality. The food is enormous and available. The recognition from others is immediate and warm. The threats are manageable. The body works perfectly. There is a generosity in how the show treats Homer's dream life that mirrors the generosity with which it treats Homer's waking life at its best. Homer's dreams are not the dreams of a man tormented by his desires. They are the dreams of a man who knows what he wants and has found, in sleep, the one place where wanting things does not require justification. The episode El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro Homer is, structurally, the most complete expression of the show's interest in Homer's interior life. It is the episode with the chili peppers and the spirit guide and the coyote that speaks in Johnny Cash's voice, and it is an episode that takes the dream logic of Homer's unconscious seriously enough to build an entire narrative around it. The desert Homer traverses is not random. The questions the coyote asks are not arbitrary. They are the questions that Homer's waking life never gets quiet enough to ask questions about purpose, about identity, about whether the person you are is the person you meant to become. The coyote asks Homer who his soulmate is. Homer, throughout this dream, is separated from Marge. The context is a fight about chili, but the dream transforms the fight into an existential crisis, into a genuine question about whether Homer knows who he is without her. And the dream, because it is a dream and therefore does not need to be fair or reassuring, does not immediately give him the answer. It makes him find it. The answer is Marge. Of course the answer is Marge. But the dream makes the answer feel earned in a way that the waking episodes rarely do, because the dream forced Homer to actually look for it, to actually sit with the uncertainty rather than default to the familiar. The dream gave Homer the experience of genuinely not knowing. That is a remarkable thing for a comedy to give its central character, a moment of genuine not knowing. A moment in which the answer to the central question of his life was not obvious. Lisa's dreams are fewer and tend to be coded in the language of alternate possibility. She dreams of worlds in which she is seen, in which her intelligence is valued without the social penalty that accompanies it in waking Springfield. She dreams of a world that has made different choices. These dreams are not presented as escapist fantasies in the dismissive sense of that phrase. The show does not undercut them with comedy or imply that Lisa's longing for a different world is naive. It treats the longing as real. It lets the dream be what the dream needs to be, which is a place where Lisa can briefly inhabit the version of her life that waking Springfield has not so far been willing to offer. The Lisa's wedding episode is not a dream sequence in the traditional sense. It is a flash forward, a vision of a possible future, but it operates with the emotional logic of a dream. It shows you what might be, under the best circumstances, if things go as hoped, and it gives Lisa, in this vision, a future that is genuinely good. A career, a relationship, independence, a life she has chosen. And then it brings her back to the present, back to the family dinner, back to Springfield, and it does something extraordinary with the transition. It makes you feel the weight of possibility. It makes you feel what it costs Lisa to return to the present, knowing what the future might contain if she can hold on long enough to reach it. Bart's dreams are aggressive and physical, and almost always about power. He dreams of winning, of domination, of situations in which his specific kind of cleverness and speed is exactly what is required. This is entirely consistent with the waking Bart, whose entire identity is built around a form of mastery, the mastery of the prank, of the escape, of the moment, when the adult's plan falls apart because Bart has been several steps ahead of it. His dreams are not different from his waking life. They are his waking life, amplified. What is interesting about Bart's dreams is what they do not contain. They do not contain much emotional vulnerability. They do not contain the version of Bart who cares what people think of him, who wants to be liked, who occasionally, in waking episodes, lets the armor down briefly and reveals a child who is uncertain and lonely and not as confident as his exterior suggests. That version of Bart appears in quiet waking moments at the end of certain episodes, in the scenes after a prank has gone wrong and caused real harm, in the scenes when Bart and Homer have one of their rare, genuine moments of connection. But not in the dreams. In the dreams, Bart is the hero. In the dreams, the uncertainty never gets in. The show uses this contrast, the gap between Dream Bart and Waking Bart, to say something true about performance, about how people present themselves when they are in control of the narrative, and how they differ in the unguarded moments when the narrative slips. Bart's dreams are his idealized self. His waking vulnerabilities are his real self. The show honors both. And then there are the stranger dreams, the dreams that are not clearly attributed to a specific character. The episodes that take on a dreamlike quality in their entirety, that use fantasy sequences and alternate realities and moments of radical formal experiment to ask questions that the show cannot ask in its regular mode. Treehouse of Horror is technically not a dream. It is an anthology of horror and fantasy stories framed as non-canonical, outside the show's continuity, allowed to do things the main show cannot do, because the deaths and transformations in the Halloween episodes do not count. But the Treehouse episodes operate with dream logic. They are the show's unconscious, the place where desires and fears and what-ifs that cannot surface in normal Springfield get to exist without consequence. Homer dies in the Treehouse episodes dozens of times. The family is destroyed and reassembled. The town is taken over, invaded, transformed, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. Which means the Treehouse episodes are the place where the show can tell the truth about its own fears, about what might happen if Bart's destructive energy were fully unleashed rather than redirected into pranks, about what might happen if Homer's ID were given complete autonomy, about what power actually looks like when the social structures that usually contain it are removed. The Treehouse episodes are nightmares with a laugh track, and the laugh track is there to make them safe to watch, to assure you that what you are seeing is entertainment and not genuine prophecy. But the detail stays with you. The detail of what the show chooses to dream about when it is allowed to dream freely. It chooses power and death and transformation. It chooses the scenarios where the rules do not apply. It chooses, over and over, the version of Springfield in which the thing that usually cannot happen is allowed to happen. The show's dreams are honest in a way that its regular episodes cannot always afford to be. They are the place where the show remembers what it is afraid of and what it most wants, and lets those things out, briefly, before the morning and the credits and the return to whatever is happening next week. Springfield dreams. It has been dreaming for 36 years. The dreams are rich and strange and more specific than any random nightmare ought to be. Pay attention to what the show dreams about. It will tell you more about Springfield than any episode set in the waking world. Section 22. The Deaths Nobody Counted. A survey of mortality in a town that cannot stop being alive. Hans Moleman has died many times. This is not metaphorical. Hans Moleman, the tiny, ancient, near-blind Springfield resident, who exists at the extreme periphery of the show's social world, has been killed, destroyed, incinerated, crushed, buried, and eliminated in ways that would be traumatic to catalog if they were happening to anyone the show seemed to genuinely care about. He has been hit by a falling safe. He has been set on fire. He has been shot. He has been run over. He has been caught in an explosion. He is, by any reasonable accounting, the most frequently deceased character in the show's entire history. And he returns every time without explanation, without memory, without scarring or grief or even the faintest trace of evidence that anything unusual happened to him the last time you saw him. Hans Moleman is immortal, in the way that only the truly forgotten are immortal. He cannot permanently die because the show does not care enough about him to make his deaths matter. Each of his deaths is a gag, a piece of background comedy, a visual punctuation mark in a scene that is about something else entirely. Hans Moleman falls out of frame and you laugh and the scene continues, and Hans Moleman appears in a later episode, alive, without comment, ready to be killed again. What the show is doing with Hans Moleman is something it never does with its main characters. It is letting you watch death as pure slapstick, as physical comedy with no emotional weight, as the thing that happens when a cartoon acknowledges its own cartoonishness, when the rules of the genre briefly surface through the fiction and you are reminded, by the absurdity of watching a man survive his 20th fatal accident, that you are watching a cartoon and cartoons do not really die. But here is the thing about Hans Moleman's deaths. You notice them. You keep track of them, informally, over years of watching. They accumulate. And their accumulation does something to your sense of the show's relationship with mortality that the show has calibrated very carefully, because the main characters must never really die, and so the show has offloaded all of Springfield's death onto the most expendable man in the city. Hans Moleman is Springfield's mortality sink. He absorbs all the death the show needs to express but cannot attach to anyone important, and he takes it cheerfully, or at least without apparent complaint, and he survives it, and he shows up next week. He is Springfield's way of acknowledging that death exists in this world, while simultaneously refusing to let death be real in any way that would threaten the central family's permanence. The deaths in The Simpsons that do matter, that are played as real, as emotionally significant, as losses that the characters carry, are a very small, very carefully selected group. The most discussed is Maud Flanders, whose death in season 11 is one of the show's most controversial decisions, and one of its most instructive in terms of what the show understands about how death works on television. Maud Flanders was killed off because the actress who voiced her had a contract dispute with the production. The death was written into the show as a practical solution to a business problem. And yet, and this is the thing worth paying attention to, the show did not treat it as a practical solution. The show treated it as a real death. It wrote episodes around Ned Flanders' grief. It showed the aftermath. It showed Ned at the grave. It showed the children asking about their mother. It gave the death weight and duration and consequence. The show could have had Maud simply disappear, move away, go on a mission, become a recurring off-screen presence. Instead, it killed her and then faced the consequences of having killed her. It made the writers deal with what her death meant to Ned, to the neighborhood, to the show's emotional fabric. Ned Flanders' grief is, in retrospect, one of the show's most sustained character studies. He is a man whose faith is the central architecture of his personality, and his wife's death, unexpected, random, caused by a t-shirt cannon at a NASCAR race, which is the show being unable to entirely suppress its own absurdism, even in a genuine tragedy, tests that architecture in ways that the show explored across multiple seasons. Not always elegantly, not always consistently, but with more seriousness and more sustained attention than most television shows give to grief as a state rather than an event. The show understands that grief does not end. Ned's grief for Maud doesn't conclude with an episode where he feels better and moves on. It continues. It surfaces in unexpected moments. It shapes his subsequent relationships, and his relationship with Homer, and his relationship with his own faith in ways that are visible if you know what you are watching for. Maud's death is the one death in the show's history that the show committed to fully and did not walk back. And it is, not coincidentally, the one death caused by an outside, practical necessity rather than a creative choice. The show did not choose to lose Maud. It was forced to, and having been forced to, it chose to honor the loss rather than dissolve it. The older generation of Springfield parents, the ones who appear in flashbacks, in the stories of how the current generation came to be who they are largely dead and have been dead for most of the show's run. Homer's mother, Mona, left when he was young and returned as a ghost. Homer's relationship with his own mother's death is one of the show's most unresolved emotional threads, because Mona's abandonment and subsequent death collapses two different kinds of loss into one. She didn't die and leave. She left and then died. The grief for her is tangled with the grief for the mother she might have been, the relationship they might have had, the childhood Homer had without her. Mother Simpson? The season 7 episode where Mona returns after years in hiding is the episode that handles this most directly and most beautifully. Homer and Mona have days together. They recover something. And then she has to leave again, for reasons connected to the political activism that caused her original departure, and Homer watches her car drive away and the credits roll in silence over his face, watching the empty road. That ending is one of the most quietly devastating things the show has ever done. No joke, no deflection. Just Homer's face and the road and the credits. The show knows what that silence means. It has always known. It just does not offer it very often, because the show is a comedy and comedies are not supposed to let the silence last. But when it does let the silence last, when it commits to the death, when it shows you the empty road, when it lets Ned Flanders still be grieving several seasons later, you understand something about what the show is actually made of. Underneath the jokes, underneath the social satire, underneath the pop culture references and the celebrity cameos and the absurdist set pieces, there is a show that takes the end of things seriously. That understands what it means to lose someone. That knows the difference between Hans Moleman falling off a cliff for the 14th time and Homer watching his mother's car disappear around a corner. Both happen in Springfield. Both are part of Springfield's relationship with mortality. One is the cartoon truth, the slapstick acknowledgement that death is always hovering at the edges of even the most cheerful world. The other is the human truth, the thing that is not funny even a little, the loss that does not have a next episode where everyone is fine. Springfield contains both. It has always contained both. The question is which one you are watching in any given episode, and whether you are watching closely enough to know. Section 23. The Marriages. What two people mean to each other when the credits have been rolling for 36 years? Homer and Marge Simpson have been married for the entire run of the show. They were married before the show began. In whatever version of the past the show has retroactively constructed across dozens of flashback episodes, and they have remained married through every crisis, every misunderstanding, every catastrophe, every moment when the marriage should have broken and did not. Their marriage is one of the most analyzed relationships in the history of American television and also, simultaneously, one of the most underanalyzed. The analysis tends to focus on the surface dynamics, on Homer's failures as a husband, on Marge's patience and its limits, on the specific ways their marriage is stressed by Homer's impulsivity and Marge's suppressed needs. These things are real and the analysis is not wrong. But it tends to miss the thing that is harder to describe, the thing that operates below the level of plot and conflict and character flaw. Homer and Marge are in love. They are genuinely, continuously, non-ironically in love with each other. In a show that treats virtually every institution with irony or satire or affectionate mockery, the love between Homer and Marge is almost entirely without irony. The show does not use their marriage to make a point about marriage. It uses their marriage to show what marriage actually is, not the romantic comedy version, not the sitcom War of the Sexes version, but the real thing. The thing that is mundane and inconvenient and full of compromise, and also, underneath all of that, something you would not trade for anything. This is an unusual artistic choice, and it is one that the show has sustained across 36 years and many hundreds of episodes. The choice required discipline. It required the writers to resist the comic and dramatic potential of a marriage that falls apart, of a couple who separate, of a protagonist who finds another relationship. There are episodes that test the marriage. There are many such episodes, but they all resolve the same way. Homer and Marge are still married at the end. The love is still there. The thing that is harder to name than attraction or convenience or habit is still there. Let's call it recognition. Homer and Marge see each other. In the specific way that long-term love involves seeing someone, in the accumulated over-decades sense of that word, seeing their particular way of being in the world, seeing their specific fears and desires and blind spots and gifts, seeing the gap between who they are and who they are trying to be, and choosing them anyway, not despite the gap, alongside it. The show encodes this recognition in small details, in the way Homer watches Marge when she is not aware of being watched, in the way Marge reaches for Homer's hand in moments of general stress that have nothing to do with the two of them specifically. These are not plot points, they are background details. They are the show's way of maintaining the continuous, unspoken fact of the marriage even in episodes where the marriage is not the subject. There is a texture to the way Homer talks about Marge that does not exist in how he talks about anything else. Homer uses a particular quality of attention when Marge enters a room that the animators developed over many seasons, a slight shift in posture, a particular kind of stillness, a look that is part comfort and part something more alert, something that has not fully relaxed into the familiar. Because even after all these years, there is still something about Marge that Homer has not taken entirely for granted. That is a real thing. That is what 20 years of marriage can look like at its best. Not the hot intensity of early attraction, not the frictionless partnership of a couple who have learned to move around each other perfectly, something more textured and more honest, the awareness of the other person as someone who is still surprising, still particular, still worth paying attention to. Marge has suppressed needs. The show acknowledges this, has built entire episodes around it, has shown you Marge's restlessness and her unexpressed ambitions, and the ways in which the role she has accepted has cost her things she does not always allow herself to articulate. The Marge episodes are some of the show's most emotionally complex and sometimes most painful because they are about a woman who is genuinely good at the life she has chosen and genuinely constrained by it. And the show does not pretend that these two things cancel each other out. But there is something the show does for Marge that is easy to miss if you are focused on the suppression. The show shows you what Marge loves, not what she has settled for, what she actually, freely loves. She loves her children with a fierceness and a specificity that the show renders beautifully. She loves the particular arrangement of her particular house. She loves Homer's laugh. She loves the moment when a meal she has made lands on a table and the family sits down around it. These are not consolation prizes. These are genuine loves. Marge's life contains both the constraint and the love, and the show honors both without pretending that having one makes the other disappear. The marriage survives in the show because the writers decided, at some foundational level, that what Homer and Marge have is worth protecting, worth not sacrificing on the altar of dramatic possibility, worth keeping intact through 36 years of episodes that could have broken it, and didn't, not because the show is afraid of change, but because some things are more true intact than broken. What they have is this: they chose each other. They chose each other when they were young and uncertain and before they fully understood what they were choosing. And the show has spent 36 years showing you what that choice looks like when it is honored, when it is maintained, when it is taken out and examined and sometimes found wanting, and sometimes found to be more than you remembered, over and over, through all of it. That is not a joke. That is not a satire. That is one of the most straightforward and most earnest things the show has ever done, and it has done it consistently for longer than most of its viewers have been alive. Ned and Maude Flanders' marriage was the show's counterpoint to Homer and Marge's. Where Homer and Marge's marriage was passionate and turbulent and grounded in the tension of their differences, Ned and Maude's was presented as harmonious, devout, organized by shared values and faith. And then Maude died, and the counterpoint was silenced, and the show was left to deal with what Ned's grief reveals about what that marriage had been. What Ned's grief reveals is that the harmony was real, that the shared values were not just performance, that Ned had a wife he loved deeply and faithfully and without irony, and losing her broke something in him that the show has spent more than 20 seasons showing the slow process of not healing exactly, but restructuring, finding a way to live in a world that has had something essential removed from it. Ned's subsequent relationships, his courtship of other women, his eventual marriage to Edna Krabappel are studies in what it is like to try to find a second love after a first one has been complete. Not better or worse than the first, different. Structured differently. Arrived at from a different place, with the awareness of loss carried into it. Ned married Edna and loved her, and was made happy by her in a way that did not cancel his love for Maude, and the show was comfortable holding both of these truths simultaneously. And then Edna died too. The actress Marcia Wallace passed away in 2013, and the show retired the character, and Ned was left grieving a second time, and the show had to find what that looks like, grief layered on grief, the second loss arriving into the space left by the first, the man who buries two wives and continues to be a man who believes that love is worth the cost of losing it. The Marriages of Springfield are the show's argument about love, about what it requires and what it gives, about whether the thing you chose when you were young was worth choosing, about whether love is primarily a feeling, which would make it unreliable, or primarily a practice, which would make it something you could commit to even on the days when the feeling was absent. Homer and Marge practice love. They do not always feel it perfectly. They do not always express it elegantly. But they keep doing it, keep coming back to it, keep choosing it in the ordinary, unremarkable way that marriage requires choosing, and the show records this choosing with a patience and a care that is, in the end, the most romantic thing about it. The most romantic thing about Homer and Marge is that they are still there, still choosing, still in the frame together, 36 years in, still yellow, still in love. Section 24, the final frame. What the show does in its last seconds every time. Every episode of The Simpsons ends on a freeze frame. Not always a meaningful one, not always a beautiful one. Sometimes the freeze frame is mid-laugh, mid-gesture, a moment captured in the middle of something that was going to continue but doesn't because the episode is over and the credits are rolling. Sometimes the freeze frame is emotionally resonant. is the show's final word on the theme of the episode, is chosen with the care of an artist deciding on the last note of a piece of music. And sometimes the freeze frame is just the moment when the timer ran out and the editor's cut. But even when it is just the moment when the timer ran out, there is a quality to the way The Simpsons ends its episodes that deserves attention. The show freezes, it holds, it gives you a still image of Springfield for a few seconds before the credits arrive. And in that stillness, whatever was moving and talking and being funny is briefly quiet, briefly suspended, briefly just a picture of people who have been with you for 22 minutes and are now staying very still while you process whatever you just watched. This is a small thing. It is easy to scroll past, easy to overlook. But the cumulative effect of watching hundreds of episodes and seeing hundreds of these freeze frames is something that builds slowly across years of watching into a specific emotional posture toward the show. You expect the stillness, you know it is coming, and when it arrives, something in you settles into it, the way you settle into a familiar gesture from someone you know well. The ending of Homer's Enemy, the Season 8 episode with Frank Grimes, is one of the most discussed endings in the show's history because the freeze frame is wrong. The joke at Frank Grimes' funeral, Homer falling asleep and shouting something foolish, and the whole crowd laughing while Grimes' coffin is being lowered is funny. And then the show freezes on it and holds, and the laughter of the animated crowd is what you are left with, and something about it is deeply unsettling. The joke is the right joke for the episode, but the freeze frame makes the laughter visible in a way that is uncomfortable, that forces you to notice that you have been laughing at a man who died because the world he was in was not built for him. The show knew this. It chose this image to freeze on. It held the frame and let you sit in the discomfort. Most freeze frames are gentler than this. Most freeze frames give you something warm the family together, a shared joke landing, a moment of affection or reconciliation or simple domestic peace. The show has thousands of these. They accumulate into a feeling of inhabiting a place where, at the end of 22 minutes, things have settled and the people you have been watching are, if not happy, at least present, at least together, at least still in the frame. There is something important in the at least still in the frame. The Simpson family has never had a final episode. The show has not ended. There is no moment of deliberate farewell, no episode written as a conclusion, no freeze frame that was designed to be the last image of Springfield you would ever see. Every freeze frame in the show's history is a provisional ending, an episode-level conclusion, a pause before next week. This gives the freeze frames a quality that is unusual in television, which is a quality of genuine continuation. When the episode ends, you know the characters are not done. You know Springfield will still be there. The freeze frame is not a goodbye. It is a pause. And the pause is what the show has always offered. A break from the continuous forward motion of your own life. A place to sit for 22 minutes that is recognizable and warm and slightly stranger than the world you actually inhabit. And then a return to your world, refreshed by the strangeness. The freeze frames have always known this. They hold still for you. They give you a last image to carry away. And then the credits roll and the music plays and Springfield waits, patient and permanent and yellow, for the next time you need it. Section 25. The continuity errors that aren't errors. A study in what looks like mistakes and isn't. The Simpsons has continuity problems. This is widely acknowledged. It is the subject of entire websites and lengthy fan discussions and official acknowledgement by the show's producers, who have, on multiple occasions, explained that the show operates on what they call a floating timeline, a narrative structure in which time does not move forward in the usual way, in which characters do not age, in which events that happened in Season 4 are simultaneously canonical and available for contradiction whenever a later episode requires it. This is generally discussed as a limitation, a product of the show's unprecedented longevity. After 36 years and hundreds of episodes, perfect continuity is impossible, and the show has not tried to maintain it. But there is a category of continuity problem in The Simpsons that is not a limitation, that is not a mistake or a failure of consistency. That is, instead, something the show is doing deliberately, something it has built into the structure of its fictional world, something that makes Springfield function differently than a world with consistent continuity would. Consider the ages of the characters. Bart has been 10 years old since 1989. Lisa has been 8. Maggie has been a baby. Homer and Marge have been in their mid-30s. In 36 years, no one in the Simpson family has had a birthday that changed their age in any permanent way. The family is suspended in amber. They exist outside of time. They are always exactly who they were at the beginning. What does this mean for the world they live in? It means that Springfield simultaneously spans multiple decades: the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s, but is not anchored to any of them. Cultural references that should date the show appear and recede. Historical events are noted and then left behind as the characters move forward into a future where they are still the same age. The show can reference things that happened in 1992 and things that happened in 2023 with equal familiarity, because Springfield is not in 1992 or 2023. Springfield is in Springfield. This is one of the quietly radical things about the show's relationship with time. It has opted out of chronology. It has built a world where the passage of time does not accumulate in the usual way, where the characters are not moving toward anything, toward old age, toward death, toward the moment when the family disperses, and the children leave, and the marriage ends or continues into something new. They are moving in place. They are moving the way a river moves continuously, visibly in motion, but always the river, always the same water, always the same course. This makes certain storytelling things impossible, and other things uniquely possible. It makes character development of the traditional kind growth, change, the arc of a life largely unavailable. Bart will not grow up. He will not become a teenager, a young adult, a man with his own family who looks back at his childhood. He is 10 permanently, and the world must be arranged around him accordingly. But what it makes possible is a form of repetition that is unlike anything else in television. The show can tell certain kinds of stories over and over, can return to the same emotional territory in different configurations, can say the same true things about the same people in different contexts, because the people are always in the same place in their lives, and the emotional territory is always available. Homer has learned to value his family in the final act of dozens of episodes. This has not changed him. He will fail to value them properly again, and learn the lesson again in a future episode. This sounds like a flaw. In a realistic narrative, it would be a flaw. A character who cannot retain the lessons they learn is a character the audience eventually stops believing in. But Springfield is not realistic. Springfield's repetition is not a continuity error. It is the structure of the world. Things in Springfield reset. Lessons are learned and unlearned. Characters return to their starting positions. And the effect this has, after hundreds of episodes, is not to make the lessons feel false. It is to make the lessons feel like the structure of a ritual. You know Homer will learn this. You know he will forget it. And you watch the learning anyway, because the learning is not about making Homer different. It is about the experience of watching someone recognize something true, even if they won't keep it. This is the experience of watching anyone learn anything. If you are honest about how learning actually works, people do not learn once and retain permanently. They learn and forget and relearn. They understand something clearly for a season and then lose it and find it again. The Simpsons, by refusing the arc of growth and locking its characters in permanent adolescence and middle age, has inadvertently modeled something true about the repetitive, non-linear nature of human development. The continuity errors that are not errors are the moments where the show's impossible timeline produces something more true than a consistent timeline could. The moment when Homer remembers something from a childhood that the show has told 3 different versions of and all 3 feel real. The moment when Springfield's geography shifts and the town is both exactly as you remember it and subtly different, larger in some places and smaller in others, the way memory works on places you have known your whole life. Memory is not consistent. Memory loops and contradicts and presents the same events from different angles with different details each time. Springfield's continuity looks like Springfield's memory. And Springfield's memory, like all memory, is not reliable and is not supposed to be. The town does not remember itself consistently. And neither, really, do you. Section 26, Bart's Rebellion. What the kid is actually saying and who he is saying it to. There is a line Bart Simpson says in almost every season. The exact words change. The context changes. The tone changes from defiant to weary to occasionally genuinely wounded. But the underlying statement never changes, and it is this. I was not made for this. Not this classroom. Not this family's expectations. Not this version of success that requires a kind of conformity Bart has never been equipped to perform. Not the world that has been arranged for him by adults who believe they know what a child should be and are offering him a blueprint that does not match any version of himself he has ever recognized. Bart's rebellion is the most surface visible thing about the character, and also, paradoxically, the thing the show has thought most deeply about over its long run. The surface version is easy. Bart is the bad kid, the underachiever, the one who does pranks and skips school and addresses authority figures with a cheerful disrespect that horrifies adults and delights children. This version of Bart is what made the character a cultural phenomenon in the early 90s, what put him on t-shirts and backpacks and made "Don't have a cow, man," a phrase that briefly everyone knew. But the show was never fully satisfied with this version of Bart. It wanted to know what was underneath the rebellion. And what is underneath the rebellion, when you look at it across hundreds of episodes and through the filter of the show at its creative best, is something more complicated and more sympathetic than the cultural shorthand suggests. Bart is bright. This is a fact the show establishes and then spends considerable effort complicating. He is not academically bright. He does not excel at the measurements of intelligence that school deploys, does not perform well on the tests that would register his intelligence in the official ledger. But he is streetwise, fast, socially perceptive, physically creative, emotionally intuitive, in ways that appear and disappear but are always present underneath his defenses. He understands people. He reads rooms. He knows when an adult is lying to him, and he knows when they are genuinely afraid, and he knows the difference between power that is real and power that is performed. This intelligence, which is real and significant, is useless in a system designed to measure a different kind of intelligence. Springfield Elementary cannot evaluate what Bart has because Springfield Elementary can only evaluate what can be standardized. And so Bart, who has real gifts, walks through his educational life being told he is a failure, being told he is behind, being told that the gap between what he could be and what he is represents a moral failing rather than a structural mismatch. The show takes this seriously. There are episodes, concentrated in the earlier seasons when the writing was most interested in the complexity of this character, where you watch Bart encounter something he is actually good at, and the effect on him is transformative. He is not swaggering. He is not performing. He is simply doing the thing that he is good at and being, briefly, the version of himself that he would be if the world were arranged differently. Bart Gets an F is an episode about this. Bart studies. He works harder than he has ever worked. He does not succeed by the metric the school is using, but he has genuinely learned something, and he knows it, and the teacher knows it, and the show treats this as a real form of success even as it refuses to pretend that it registers on the official scale. Bart cries. This is one of the very few times Bart Simpson cries in the run of the series, and the show treats his crying with total seriousness, with none of the usual deflection that the show uses to avoid its own sentimentality. Bart cried because he tried, and it was not enough. The show let him cry. It did not fix it with a joke. The relationship between Bart and Homer is the show's most dynamic father-son portrait, and also one of its most unpredictable, because the two characters share the same flaws in different configurations. Homer is an adult who never fully learned the lesson that the world was teaching him and has developed a robust set of coping mechanisms for avoiding that lesson. Bart is a child who has not yet developed those mechanisms and is experiencing, raw and unmediated, the full weight of the world's judgment of him. They recognize each other across this gap. They are capable of genuine connection when they reach across it, and the episodes built around Homer and Bart connection are some of the most emotionally resonant in the show because the connection is earned, because these two people are not naturally easy with each other, and when they are, it means something. Bart the Daredevil has a scene near the end where Homer falls down Springfield Gorge instead of Bart, and the scene plays the physical comedy of Homer's fall completely straight, the bouncing, the log, the ambulance, the whole sequence, but the emotional core of the scene is that Homer took the fall instead of Bart. Homer didn't plan it. He did not calculate it. He just moved. And the movement told Bart something that Homer could not have said in words. That is the Homer-Bart relationship. Inarticulate and physical and occasionally accidentally exactly right. Bart's rebellion is also partly a rebellion on behalf of the show itself. The show was always slightly suspicious of authority and institutions, and the people who benefit from them, always slightly more on the side of the person who refuses to comply than the person demanding compliance. Bart is the show's most explicit embodiment of this suspicion. He is the kid who does not believe the principal has his best interests at heart. He is the kid who does not believe the teacher's authority is automatically legitimate. He is the kid who looks at the official story and asks, with genuine curiosity and no particular agenda, whether any of it is actually true. This is not a heroic position in Springfield. It is not rewarded. Bart's skepticism about authority does not produce wisdom or success by the show's metric. It produces pranks and detention and parental disappointment. But the show has never suggested that this skepticism is wrong. It has never written an episode where the lesson is that Bart should simply comply, should fold himself into the shape the institution is offering. It has shown the cost of his position, and it has shown the cost of conformity, and it has refused to resolve the argument. Bart's rebellion continues. The school continues. Springfield continues. And somewhere in the back rows of an eternal fourth-grade classroom, a 10-year-old kid who will always be 10 is drawing something in the margin of his notebook and not listening. And the show still doesn't know whether to tell him to stop. Neither, honestly, do we. Interlude? The background people. What Springfield looks like when nobody important is standing in front of it. There are people in Springfield who are not characters. They are not extras in the Hollywood sense. They are not anonymous faces hired to fill a crowd. They are specific. They have consistent designs. Several of them have names. A few have spoken, once or twice, in episodes where the story drifted briefly in their direction. But they are not characters in the operational sense that the show uses characters. They do not have arcs. They do not have episode-level purposes. They exist for one reason and one reason only, which is to make Springfield feel inhabited. And they do. They make it feel inhabited in a way that no amount of main character presence could accomplish alone. Because the main characters are the people you are watching, and the background people are the people you are not watching, and the people you are not watching are what make a place rather than a stage. Think about the last real location you spent time in. A train station, a coffee shop, a park, a street. Think about how much of that experience was the specific people you were there with or there to see, and how much of it was the ambient presence of other people, people going somewhere else, people in conversations you could not hear, people existing in their own lives entirely independent of your presence in the space. The ambient people are the texture of the place. Without them, the coffee shop is a set. With them, it is somewhere. Springfield's background people are this. They are the texture. The fat man in the red shirt who appears in crowd scenes, the woman with the large hat who is somehow at every Springfield public event, the man with the 5 o'clock shadow who stands slightly too close to other people at bus stops. None of them are important. All of them are Springfield. The show populated its background with specific, consistent figures as early as the second season and has maintained many of them across the entire run. Some background figures have gotten names from the writer's room, names that fans eventually discovered through DVD commentary and writer interviews, names that the show itself has never used on screen but that represent the writer's relationship with their own created world. The practice of knowing the people in your world, even when the story doesn't require you to name them. This is not nothing. This is evidence of a world-building instinct that the show has always had, and that is easy to take for granted precisely because the background people are invisible to casual viewing. You have to be looking for them to find them. You have to be the kind of viewer who watches the background, who lets your eye drift away from the central action to take in the edges of the frame, who is interested not just in what the show is telling you to look at, but in what exists in the periphery of that telling. What exists in the periphery is Springfield, the real Springfield. The version of the town that is not organized around the needs of the main characters, but simply exists, going about its Springfield business, living its Springfield life, being the town that the main characters live inside of, rather than the town that exists to serve the main characters' stories. This distinction matters. A show that exists purely to serve its main characters, where every background detail, every setting choice, every unnamed face is present only to support the central storyline, is a functional show, a story delivery mechanism, a show with a genuine background, with a world that extends past the edges of the plot into something that feels self-sustaining, feels different, It feels like somewhere rather than something. It feels like a place you could visit rather than a story you are being told. Springfield feels like somewhere you could visit. That is one of its most unusual qualities, and one of the most difficult things about it to articulate. Most fictional worlds feel like sets. Springfield, at its best, feels like a town that exists whether or not anyone is filming in it. The background people are the most concrete evidence of this. They are there when the camera does not need them. They are there because Springfield is there, because a town of this size would have these people in it, because the world the show built is large enough to contain people whose stories it will never tell. That largeness is what makes it home, not just for the characters, for us. Section 27. The world outside Springfield. What the show reveals when it leaves home. Springfield is not the only place in the world of The Simpsons. The show has, across 36 years, sent its characters to dozens of countries, hundreds of locations, every imaginable geographic and cultural context. Homer has been to Japan, to Brazil, to France, to Antarctica. The family has visited New York, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, Hollywood. Bart has been to Germany and Australia. Lisa has had pen pals in foreign countries and academic connections that reach far beyond Springfield's borders. And yet the world outside Springfield is always, in some fundamental way, somewhere that the Simpsons do not belong. Not in a xenophobic way. Not in a way that suggests the outside world is wrong or inferior. In a structural way. In the way that every episode that takes the family out of Springfield has a gravitational pull back toward it, the episode always ends at home, always concludes with the family returning to Evergreen Terrace, to the couch, to the specific domestic geography that is the real location of the show regardless of where any particular episode has traveled. The world outside Springfield functions as contrast, as the thing that reveals, by its difference, what Springfield is. When the family goes to a city where things work, where the infrastructure is modern, where the government is not obviously corrupt, where the billionaire does not own the electricity, the gap between that place and Springfield becomes visible in ways it is not visible from inside Springfield. The family notices, sometimes. They comment, and then they go home. This pattern is not accidental. The show is doing something with it, something that operates across the entire run of the series as a continuous, quiet observation about the relationship between people and place. Springfield's residents, including the Simpson family, are Springfield people. They were shaped by Springfield. They carry Springfield with them. And the world outside Springfield, however functional or beautiful or interesting, is not the world that made them, and it cannot fully contain them. There is a recurring pattern in the travel episodes where Homer or Bart, the two characters most firmly rooted in Springfield's particular energy, do something that is completely normal behavior in Springfield and catastrophically wrong everywhere else. Bart's Australian trip builds an entire plot out of this. What Bart does in Springfield as a prank, as a normal expression of his particular kind of intelligence, becomes an international incident when it happens in a country with different norms and different legal structures. The joke is about cultural difference, yes, but the deeper joke is about how much Bart is Springfield, how thoroughly Springfield has shaped him, how he moves through the world as a Springfield person and the world does not always know what to do with that. Homer's travel episodes follow a similar pattern. Homer in Japan is Homer trying to navigate a culture organized around social codes he has never encountered, using the only social codes he knows, which are Springfield social codes, direct, appetitive, physically expressive, unconcerned with hierarchy or formality. He fails. He recovers. He is charming in his failure in the way that Homer is often charming, because his failure comes from genuine ignorance rather than arrogance, from a man who simply is what he is and does not have the guile to pretend otherwise. The most revealing travel episode in the show's history is the New York episode, the one the show was reluctant to air for years because of the September 11 attacks and the towers visible in the background of the establishing shot. In the original contents before that date changed the meaning of the New York skyline, the episode is about Homer's complicated relationship with New York. As a city, he dislikes it, he is overwhelmed by it, he feels alien there in a way that is different from how he feels alien in foreign countries. Foreign countries are supposed to be different. New York is supposed to be American, and Homer's America is Springfield, and New York is not Springfield. and the gap between them makes Homer feel something close to judgment. This is one of the show's most honest observations about a certain kind of American identity, the identity organized around small-town or suburban life, the identity that experiences large American cities as not quite American, as too dense and too fast and too organized around values other than the ones that feel like home. Homer's discomfort in New York is not played entirely as comedy. It is played as the genuine experience of someone who has a very specific idea of what America means to him, and who encounters, in the middle of this large American city, evidence that America contains much more than his idea. He goes home. Of course he goes home. The world outside Springfield is always larger and more various and more complicated than Springfield. This is the show's honest acknowledgement that Springfield is not the world, that it is a particular place with particular limitations, that it is someone's home but not everyone's home, that the specificity of it is both its charm and its constraint. And the family keeps going home. They see the world and they come back to the couch and the yellow skin and the cracked cooling towers and the billionaire who cannot remember Homer's name. They come back because Springfield, for all its strangeness and damage, is theirs, because home is not the best available option. Home is the particular option. Home is the place that made you, and the place you carry with you, and the place you keep returning to, because returning to it is the one thing you know how to do without a map. Springfield will always be where The Simpsons ends up. Every travel episode confirms this. Every trip outside the show's home geography reinforces what home means. The world outside Springfield exists so that Springfield can be understood more clearly. So that when the family comes back to Evergreen Terrace, you know what they are choosing to come back to. They know too. They choose it anyway. They have been choosing it every episode for 36 years. That is what it means to have a home. Not the best place, your place. Not perfect, known. Section 28. Lisa's saxophone. The sound that never stopped playing, even when nobody was listening. Lisa Simpson plays the saxophone. She has played it since the show's beginning. She plays it in her room, in the garage, in the school band, on the roof, in the backyard at night when the house is quiet. She plays when she is happy and when she is devastated and when she does not know what she is feeling. She plays because the saxophone is the one form of communication in which she never has to worry about being misunderstood. The saxophone came from Bleeding Gums Murphy. This is a piece of the show's mythology that is not as discussed as it deserves to be, because the relationship between Lisa and this jazz musician who found her crying on a bridge one night and taught her that the blues was the right language for what she was feeling is the show's most direct statement about how artistic inheritance works, how the people who teach us the forms we need do not always stay, how what they give us outlasts their presence. Bleeding Gums Murphy died. He died in season 6 in a way that was quiet and uncelebrated within Springfield, because Springfield is not a town that stops to mourn the jazz musicians who play late at night in places most people don't go. Lisa was the only person in Springfield who seemed to fully understand what had been lost. She grieved in the particular way that a child grieves a teacher, not just for the person, but for the future conversations that will not happen, for the questions she had not yet thought to ask, for the version of herself that was still forming in response to the thing he was teaching her. She played his song at his memorial. She played it through tears. She played it because the saxophone was the only instrument capable of holding the specific weight of what she was feeling, because there are emotions that do not fit inside language and need a different container, and the saxophone has always been Lisa's container for everything that is too large for words. The saxophone is also Lisa's social liability. The show has been honest about this across multiple episodes. People do not always want to hear Lisa play. The instrument is not fashionable. The school band setting in which she usually plays is not a setting that rewards individual expression. Her family is intermittently supportive and intermittently exhausted by the sound of a child practicing scales through the walls. Springfield's relationship with Lisa's gift is the same as Springfield's relationship with Lisa's intelligence. It is acknowledged when it cannot be ignored and otherwise allowed to recede into the background. Noise of a town with many other concerns. But the saxophone does not recede. It keeps playing. In episode after episode, in the brief moments the show gives over to Lisa's music, the saxophone is present. Clausen's scoring treated Lisa's playing with the same seriousness that he brought to the orchestral, underscore the jazz lines that Lisa plays in her room. The blues runs that represent her emotional life were scored and performed with care. They were not cartoon music. They were music. There is something the show communicates about art through Lisa's relationship with the saxophone that is one of its most quietly radical positions. Art does not require an audience to be real. The saxophone in Lisa's room at night, played for no one, recorded by no one, appreciated by no one except the player. This is still music. Still real, still valuable, still worth playing. This is a position that runs against most of what the entertainment industry and most of what Springfield believes about the value of things. In Springfield, value is social. Things matter because other people recognize that they matter. The nuclear power plant matters because it powers the town. Mr. Burns matters because he is wealthy. Homer matters when he matters because he is connected to people who are connected to things that are connected to the social fabric. Value flows through recognition. Lisa's saxophone exists outside this system. She plays it regardless of whether anyone is listening. She has played it for 36 years without becoming famous or recognized or rewarded in any way that the world would consider meaningful. She plays it because it is the language she thinks in, because it is the form her inner life takes when it needs to be externalized, because Bleeding Gums Murphy gave her a way of being in the world that she has never been willing to put down, even when putting it down would make her life considerably easier. That is a kind of commitment the show does not usually romanticize or explicitly celebrate. It just shows it, quietly, in the background. Lisa in her room with the saxophone, playing something that the show does not always let us hear fully, playing it anyway. There is a future version of Lisa, the adult Lisa we see in flash-forward episodes. The Lisa who has grown up and left Springfield and become a person who uses her intelligence in the world in the ways she always hoped she would, and in these futures, the saxophone is always present. She did not put it down. Whatever else she became, she kept playing. The show knew that. It needed you to know that. The saxophone is the one thing in Lisa's life that belongs entirely to her, not to Springfield, not to the school, not to the expectations of her family or the social pressures of the community. Hers. And every time you hear it in the opening credits, in the quiet scenes at the end of difficult episodes, in the moments where the show stops the plot and lets her play, you are hearing the show's most direct communication of what it values. Not power, not money. Not the approval of Burns or the recognition of a town that cannot always see its own people clearly. A kid in a room, playing. That's it. That's the answer to what Springfield has always been, underneath everything else. A kid in a room, playing something beautiful for no one but herself, and the music going out through the window anyway, into the Springfield night, into the air that everyone breathes, into the whole strange, damaged, beloved, impossible world. Section 29. Homer and Marge in the quiet episodes. The marriage in its smallest, truest moments. The loudest episodes about Homer and Marge's marriage are not the most honest ones. The episodes built around the threat of divorce, the episodes where Marge considers leaving or Homer nearly loses her, or the marriage is foregrounded as the subject of 22 minutes of story. These are important episodes, and they contain real emotional content, and the show has made several of them with genuine care. But the most honest portrayals of what Homer and Marge's marriage actually is happen in the small moments. The moments between the plot, the moments that are not the subject of the episode but are present in it anyway, in the background, in the peripheral frame. A meal at the kitchen table where Homer says something thoughtless and Marge gives him the look. Not the angry look, not the disappointed look, but the particular look she has developed across decades of Homer being Homer, which contains both exasperation and familiarity, and a kind of affection that is inseparable from both. This look, this specific expression, the show has used it hundreds of times, and what it communicates cannot be reduced to a single emotion because it is not a single emotion. It is the face of someone who has known another person for a very long time and is, at this moment, knowing them again, in the familiar and unremarkable way. Homer has a reciprocal expression. It appears in the moments when Marge is upset about something, and Homer actually understands without being told, through the 30-year accumulation of learning to read this particular person what she needs. These moments are not common in the show. They are specifically uncommon because Homer's inability to read social situations is one of his defining traits and a consistent source of comedy. But the show has always known that this inability is not total, that there are exceptions, that the person who knows you best is sometimes the person who fails you most reliably in public and understands you most precisely in private. The quiet episodes are the ones that trust this, that do not require a crisis to justify showing you the marriage at its actual texture. There are scenes brief, not always the point of the scene, easily missed if you are watching for the main story, where Homer puts his arm around Marge while they are watching television, where Marge leans her head on Homer's shoulder in a car, where Homer comes into the kitchen in the morning and the first thing he does, before coffee, before donuts, before any of the appetites that define his waking life, is put his hand briefly on Marge's back as he passes her. These gestures are in the show. They have always been in the show. The animators put them there because the writers asked for them, because the show's understanding of this marriage required them, because without these small physical facts, the marriage would only be visible in the large, dramatic moments and would lose the quality it actually has, which is the quality of long, habitual love, of two people whose bodies have learned to be in the same space, with an ease that took years to develop. There is an episode, not a marriage episode, an episode about something else entirely, where Homer and Marge are in the background of a scene that is primarily about Bart, and Homer is standing behind Marge and she is talking to someone else, and Homer reaches up and touches the tower of her hair just briefly, just a brushing contact, and then his hand drops and the scene moves on. And the episode never references this, and you would miss it entirely if you blinked. This is the show trusting you, showing you something real and small and not explaining it. Trusting that if you have been watching long enough, if you have been paying the kind of attention the show rewards, you will see it and know what it means without being told. What it means is, I am here, in the room with you, aware of you, still here. That is what 36 years of marriage looks like in its quietest register. Not passion, not drama, not the operatic moments of connection that television usually offers as evidence that love is real. A hand touching a tower of impossible blue hair, briefly, in the background of a scene about something else. A man acknowledging his wife's presence in the only way the moment allows, which is a small physical truth, and then letting the moment pass. The passing is part of it. The moment is not performed for anyone. It does not need to be acknowledged or reciprocated or explained. It is just a thing Homer does because Marge is there and he is there, and this is what it means to be there together after all this time. Marge sees it. The show is careful to have Marge see it, briefly, without turning around fully, a slight shift in her posture, the suggestion of a smile she does not display, because the conversation she is having requires her attention elsewhere. She knows he does this. She has known it for 30 years. She has noticed it every time, and she has never said anything about it, and she never will, because saying something about it would change what it is, which is not a gesture but a fact, a habit, evidence of ongoing presence. This is what the quiet episodes contain. This is what you find when you stop watching for the jokes and the plots and the cultural references and watch instead for the evidence of what these characters mean to each other. The evidence is there. It has always been there. It is small, and it is habitual, and it is exactly as romantic as anything the show has ever produced with full dramatic intention. Maybe more. Because the dramatic moments require effort. They require crisis and resolution and the emotional machinery of consequence. But the small moments, Homer's hand on Marge's back, Marge's slight smile, two people in the same room knowing each other, these require nothing except continuity. Nothing except the fact of still being there, still paying attention, still doing the small, unremarkable thing that says, I see you, I am here, still here. The show has been here for 36 years, still paying attention, still doing the small, unremarkable thing. Section 30. The Long Goodbye. Why Springfield never ends, and what that has always meant about us. Every story ends. That is the rule. That is the architecture of narrative. You build something, you move through it, you find the conclusion, and the conclusion gives meaning to everything that came before it. The reader or the viewer is left with the shape of the whole thing, and the shape tells them what the story was about, what it meant, what to carry away. Stories without conclusions feel incomplete. They feel like promises that were not kept. The Simpsons is a story that has not ended. It has been 36 years and it has not ended. The family is in the house. Homer is at the plant. Bart is at school. Lisa is playing her saxophone. Maggie is watching everything with those enormous, ancient, knowing eyes. Springfield is still Springfield, still impossible, still yellow, still the town that forgot its own disasters and voted to exile truth and cannot figure out why the fish have three eyes. The show has not ended, and the question worth asking, the question that lives at the back of every theory, every analysis, every late-night conversation about why this particular cartoon has kept its hold on people across 4 decades and multiple generations is why. Not why the show keeps airing. The commercial reasons for that are straightforward, but why we keep watching. Why a show that by any objective measure should have exhausted its cultural capital decades ago continues to mean something to people who were not alive when it started. Why new viewers find it and fall into it and emerge weeks later having watched 200 episodes and wondering what happened to them. Why the older viewers who watched it first, who grew up with it, who know it the way you know a place you lived in childhood, cannot fully let it go. There is a theory that is not really a theory. It is more of a recognition. The recognition is this. The Simpsons became, over its 36 years, a place. Not a show, a place. It became somewhere you go. Somewhere that exists in a fixed form, waiting for you, not changing in the ways that places you love in the real world inevitably change. The neighborhood you grew up in has been renovated or demolished or become unrecognizable. The house you lived in belongs to someone else. The friends you had at 10 are different people or unreachable people or people whose lives have diverged from yours so completely that the shared past feels like it belongs to strangers. Time has moved through your real world and changed everything. But Springfield is still Springfield. Bart is still 10. The couch is still the same couch. The opening credits still play the same notes and the family still runs in from different directions, and the couch gag still happens, and Homer still gets crushed and the show still begins. And for however long the episode lasts, you are back in the place you remember. The place has not changed. It is waiting for you exactly as you left it. This is not a small thing. This is not a trivial comfort. For many people who grew up watching this show, Springfield is woven into the fabric of their memory in a way that very few other things from their childhood are. It is associated with specific nights, specific rooms, specific states of being, the experience of watching it before you fully understood what it was doing, when it was just funny, just home, just the thing on Sunday nights that meant the weekend was ending and the next week was coming, and everything was, provisionally, all right. The comfort of returning to Springfield is the comfort of returning to the version of yourself who first found it, who watched it from a couch in a house that no longer exists, in a time that cannot be recovered, with people who were younger then and may or may not still be present in your life. Springfield holds all of that. Springfield is the permanent address of a childhood. You can go back any time. The show will be there. The family will be there. Nothing will have changed. This is the long goodbye. The goodbye that never arrives. The show that keeps going so that the goodbye never has to be said, so that the version of yourself who first loved it never has to be formally mourned, so that the ending which would give the whole story its shape, its meaning, its final frame never comes, and you are therefore never required to sit with the weight of what it meant. We have been sitting with Springfield without sitting with what Springfield means, because meaning would require distance, and distance would require an ending, and the ending would require us to step outside the loop and look back at the whole thing and say, that was what it was. That was what it meant to me. Here is what I am carrying away. We are not ready for that. We have not been ready for that for 36 years. And so the show continues, and the family is still on the couch, and Bart writes the same line on the chalkboard, slightly different each week, always the same structure, the repetition that is not punishment but ritual. And Homer says dough, and Marge makes a sound, and Lisa plays her saxophone, and Maggie watches everything, and Springfield goes on being impossible and yellow and exactly what it has always been. The theories we have explored tonight, the radiation, the coma, the immortal billionaire, the town that criminalizes truth, the baby with the gun, the predictions, the mother who had to leave, the location that cannot be fixed. All of them are attempts to say something true about a show that has been saying true things for 36 years, in a language made of jokes and yellow faces and a saxophone in a window at night. All of them arrive at the same place. A family, a house, a street, a town. People who are damaged and loving and limited and occasionally extraordinary, living inside a loop that they did not build and cannot escape, watched by an audience that built the loop and maintains it and returns to it faithfully, every time, because the loop is theirs. This is what we built in Springfield. This is what we have been tending for 36 years. A world that does not move forward. A family that does not grow old. A set of people we love in the specific, undemanding way you love something that asks nothing of you except your attention. And what it asks in return, what Springfield has always asked, in every episode, in every frame, in every joke, and every quiet moment, and every reset, and every freeze frame, is that you stay. Just a little longer. Just one more episode. Just a little further into the night. In the house where the lights are low, and the television is warm, and the family on the screen is going through something you recognize, even if you cannot say exactly what it is you recognize or why it stays with you the way it does. Stay. Springfield will be here when you get back. It has always been here. It will always be here. In the dream of an unconscious man, in the glow of a poisoned town, in the logic of a world that voted to forget the truth, in the silence of a baby who knows everything and is waiting for the right moment to speak, in the music that played under everything for 27 years, in the marriage that chose itself every morning in the background of the scene, in the saxophone in the window, in the donut in the hand, in the yellow face turning to look at you from the couch. Springfield is yours. It was always yours. That is the mystery. That is the only mystery that was ever here. Sleep well. The show will be here in the morning. It is always in the morning, always on the couch, always beginning again, always the family, always the town. Always the loop. Always the light from the screen falling on the face of someone who needed, just for a little while, to go home. Go home. Springfield is waiting. It always has been. Thank you for spending these hours in Springfield. If you found your way to the end of this, whatever time it is and wherever you are, you should be asleep. The town will be here when you wake up. It always is. That is the whole point. Rest now. Interlude. What the opening credits are actually showing you. The opening credits of The Simpsons last approximately 90 seconds. In those 90 seconds, the show does something that very few television programs have ever managed to do in their opening sequences. It gives you a complete emotional map of the world you are about to enter. Not an expository map, not a list of characters and their relationships and the setting and the premise. An emotional one. A map of what Springfield feels like from the inside. The camera moves through the town. We see the clouds, which are the oversaturated yellow-white of a sky that has been breathing something industrial for a long time. We see the nuclear plant, framed not with menace but with the matter-of-fact familiarity of a landmark. It is there the way a water tower is there, the way a downtown building is there, the way the things that define a place's skyline are there. Visible, constant, not requiring comment. We move through Springfield and we see its residents going about their days. A barber? A construction site, a bus, a classroom. Nobody is doing anything remarkable. Nobody is at the center of a drama. They are just people in a town at the ordinary, unremarkable middle of an ordinary, unremarkable day. Springfield at its most normal. Springfield at the speed of daily life. And then the family, converging. Homer from the plant, narrowly avoiding disaster as he always narrowly avoids disaster, carrying the plutonium rod and losing it and not noticing. Marge at the supermarket with Maggie, paying for Maggie accidentally, carrying her home in the bag. Bart on the skateboard threading through the town, through the ordinary people, through the ordinary day, arriving at the house. Lisa on the bus, with her saxophone, with her music, arriving. They all arrive. They are all headed to the same place. Whatever directions their days have taken them, however far they have gone from the house on Evergreen Terrace, they are coming back. The credits are an arrival. The credits are the end of the day as much as they are the beginning of the episode. The day that happened before the episode started. The day we did not see. The day of ordinary absence and ordinary motion that precedes the story. And then the couch. And then the episode. Every episode begins this way. Every episode is preceded by this arrival. Every story the show tells is framed by the image of a family coming home to each other after a day apart, landing on the same couch, settling into the same frame. Whatever happens next, whatever crisis or comedy or catastrophe the episode has prepared, it begins after the family has found each other, after the arrival. This is not incidental. This is the show's architecture. The family finds each other first, then the story. And at the end of the story, they will be on the couch again. They will be together again. The frame will hold, and the credits will roll. And next week, they will leave and return. They will always return. The opening credits are a promise. The show has been keeping it for 36 years. A final note on the silence. There is a sound at the very end of some Simpsons episodes, after the freeze frame and before the credits, where the show is completely quiet for a moment. Not long. A fraction of a second. The joke or the scene or the moment has finished, the image has frozen, and there is a breath before the music of the credits arrives. A breath in which Springfield is still and nothing is moving, and the episode has ended, and the next thing has not yet begun. In that breath, in that quarter second of silence between the story and the credits, something is true about The Simpsons that is harder to name than anything else this script has attempted to name. The silence is where the show knows what it is, where it rests in its own nature without the performance of being a comedy or a satire or a social document or a mythology. Where it is just the image of the family in the town that cannot be located, frozen, breathing, it does not last. The credits arrive and the music plays and the episode is filed away and the next episode is already coming. But the silence is there. It has always been there. In every episode, in every season, for 36 years. You can hear it if you listen at the right moment. If you stop watching for a second and let the show breathe, it is there. It is always there. Good night. The show that understood what it was. There is a question that gets asked about long-running shows when they reach the stage that The Simpsons has reached, when they have been on long enough that multiple generations of viewers have grown up with them, when they have become part of the furniture of a culture. Does the show still know what it is? The Simpsons, at its best, has always known what it is. It is a show about a family, about a town, about the experience of living inside a system that does not have your best interests at heart, while also loving the specific, flawed, limited, beautiful life that the system has produced for you. It is a show that cannot fully endorse Springfield or fully condemn it, cannot fully endorse Homer or fully condemn him, cannot fully resolve the tension between what Springfield is and what it could be, because resolving that tension would require the show to take a position that would reduce the complexity of what it has spent 36 years building. The complexity is the show. The irreducibility is the show. The way every theory about Springfield generates a counter-theory, every reading of a character generates a counter-reading, every attempt to settle what the show means runs into new evidence that it means something else as well. This is not a failure of the show's intentions. It is the show's achievement. The show built something that can sustain this much looking, this much thinking, this much engagement, without collapsing into a simple meaning or a settled verdict. That is what great art does. It remains available to interpretation. It repays attention. It generates new readings as the reader changes, as the culture changes, as the questions you bring to it shift with the years. You watch The Simpsons at 10 and you see one show. You watch it at 30 and you see another. You watch it at 50 and you see a third thing, not contradicting the previous two, but containing them, the way a place you have known your whole life contains all the versions of yourself that have walked through it. Springfield contains all of those versions of you. It has been there for all of them. It will be there for the ones that haven't arrived yet. The show that understood what it was is still running, still yellow, still at the couch, still beginning again every week with the family arriving home, still breathing in the quiet before the credits. Still here. So are you. Rest now. Springfield will be here in the morning. It always is. There is one more thing worth saying. At the end of all of this, after the theories and the close readings and the long meditation on a cartoon family in a cartoon town that has somehow accumulated this much meaning over 36 years, The Simpsons made people feel less alone, not in the big public cultural phenomenon way, though it did that too, in the private way. In the way that you recognize something on the screen that you had not seen recognized before, the specific texture of a family dinner that is going wrong in a particular way, the specific experience of a child who is smarter than the environment built to educate them, The specific loneliness of a man who works a job that does not fit him and comes home and loves his family with a completeness that the job cannot diminish. The specific patience of a woman who knows that the version of her life she is living is not the only version available, but who has found inside the version she has enough to sustain her. These are real things. They happen in real homes. They happen in the specific, unremarkable, private way that most of life happens, in the spaces between events, in the ordinary nights that do not make good television, but that constitute the majority of what a life actually contains. The Simpsons looked at the ordinary nights. It took them seriously. It built a world in which the ordinary night, the couch, the television, the family assembled in its imperfect configuration, doing nothing in particular was treated as the thing worth returning to, worth building the whole show around. That recognition, the recognition that the ordinary night matters, that the family on the couch matters, that the unremarkable life lived in a limited town by people without particular distinction, is still a life worth taking seriously, worth watching, worth attending to with the kind of care that this show has attended to it for 36 years. That is the gift the show gave to everyone who watched it and saw themselves in it. You were seen. Whatever version of Springfield you recognized, whatever member of the family you found yourself in, whatever corner of the show's enormous constructed world felt like it had been built with you specifically in mind, you were seen. The show saw you. It has been seeing you for 36 years. Sleep well.